An entitled toxic coworker pranks my trainees so badly that one of them rushes to my office so upset that they were in tears. So I decided to get some revenge by humiliating them in front of our boss in such a way that honestly makes them look like a complete idiot. And I've honestly never felt better in my life about getting back at somebody in this way. Here's what happened. Many years ago, I had a job where I worked with a company's apprentices and helped guide them in their job duties and training. This is a male-dominated field, and the workshops can be pretty tough on the trainees, especially the females. At the time, I had 2 apprentices, 1 girl and 1 boy, and they were absolutely amazing workers in every way possible. But in the shop, we had several men that loved making the trainees' lives difficult. All the usual pranks like sending them to the store to get a T1000 bolt stretcher or 10 liters of compressed water. None of this was really cruel, but when they already feel like they don't fit in or even know how things work, these pranks can really make them feel low. One older guy in the workshop, let's call him Bob, had decided to pull his usual prank on the trainees. After they unlocked the trainee toolbox, he replaced their open lock with a duplicate lock. At the end of the day, they locked their toolbox up and went home, not knowing that it wouldn't be open the next day. What Bob didn't know was that the trainees were scheduled to do some really important jobs for a very nasty middle manager at 7 the next morning. Additionally, Bob was sent to a different location before work started, leaving both trainees unable to get their tools. Well, I finished a meeting at 9 o'clock, and I was met in my office by a crying 18-year-old girl. When they arrived at the shop in the morning, the manager assigned them some tasks and kept bothering them about their progress. Well, apparently they were too embarrassed to say that they couldn't remember the code to the toolbox lock, and that Bob had locked up all the items they could use to cut the lock off. The manager stressed them out so bad that they just basically shut down. So I went to the shop and I opened Bob's toolbox and I let them use his tools, which, if you don't know, is a huge deal in a workshop. You never use someone's tools without permission. Bob returned a couple of hours later and was actually upset that they were in his toolbox, but also was incredibly pleased that they had issues with that manager. Now, I could have left it there, but honestly, I'm very spiteful and petty, so this is where I decided to get some revenge. Well, a month or so later, one of the trainees found a crate that had hand tools that had been missing for years, and we're talking thousands of dollars worth of tools. Saltwater had gotten inside and the tools were very rusty. He was going to show them how to clean up those tools and make them work like brand new again. The only problem was that Bob wasn't a very good industrial mechanic, and he definitely wasn't good at cleaning tools. So he took a 5-gallon bucket of WD-40, which by the way cost about $200, and just dumped a bunch of rusty tools in it. And sure, WD-40 is many things, but rust remover is not one of them. The trainees then excitedly showed me the tools they found and the bucket where Bob was helping to fix the tools. Bob strolled over and pulled a tool from the bucket and gave it a few attempts to see if it was free and dumped it back in. I told him it wouldn't remove the rust, but he replied by saying, "Just wait and see, I've done this many times before." Well, after a few days of this, I had an epiphany. I then told the trainees to stick around after work on Friday if they wanted to get some revenge on Bob. So we removed the tools from the WD-40, we dried them off, and we bead blasted the rust right off of them. Then we disassembled the ones with moving parts and greased them until they worked like new. Then we carefully dumped rusty metal dust onto all of the tools and slowly lowered them back into the WD-40. Well, fast forward to Monday morning during the weekly walkthrough, and I made sure to lead the boss towards the giant bucket of tools. He reacted exactly as I thought he would after seeing $200 of wasted WD-40. He also told Bob it's not rust remover. Bob grabbed a tool from the bucket, held it up, and miraculously it wiped clean. I mean, this looked like new. And best of all, it functioned like new. He proudly showed the boss that he was right all along, bragging about his expertise with tools. About this time, the trainees were smiling and chuckling. Bob asked what was so funny, the WD-40 worked. And that's when I prompted one of the trainees to tell Bob a little story about what they did after work on Friday, how they blasted and cleaned the tools because WD-40 isn't a rust remover. The boss then started laughing hysterically, basically saying, "Well, duh, even the trainees know WD-40 won't remove rust." When the big boss said that, Bob literally turned bright red. He was stuttering and stammering, trying hard to play it off like he didn't care. But all day long, I kept retelling the story, especially if Bob was near. For weeks, he was being asked if he had some extra WD-40 by random people in the workshops. So the moral of this story is don't mess with my apprentices on my watch, especially if you try to hit them with some kind of malicious prank. Oh man, this really is nice, but honestly, I think you could have gone way further with Bob. Don't get me wrong, I love the fact that you humiliated him in front of your boss, and literally in front of the entire company, but this guy almost cost these people their job. Like the fact that they didn't know their code to get into that stupid cabinet, like that really could have been so much worse than just public humiliation. That could have cost them their career, and no less from a manager who's like so stuck up it's not even funny. And for me personally, I think pranks and stuff like that really should be reserved to coworkers that you actually like, because at least there's some kind of like camaraderie there. And you know at the end of the day, they're not going to be like super offended or hurt or something like that. But regardless, in my opinion, I think you did a great job in making Bob look like a complete idiot, because what he did, in my opinion, is completely unacceptable. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for not letting my husband attend his sister's wedding, all because I was pregnant and I could give birth while he was gone? Because right now there's a lot of drama in the family and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So my husband and myself are expecting our first child this May in 2025. We found out very early in September, and we did not keep this a secret from anyone. And in fact, we shared the news in person with his family and with my family on the day that we found out. During this period, his sister was getting to know someone and got engaged in October of 2024. It's sort of an arranged marriage, as she was set up and decided to get engaged only after 3 months of speaking to the guy. Her parents, who are my in-laws, were happy that she liked him and wanted to quickly move forward. And apparently she's been wanting to get married for the past 5 years. After the engagement party in October, there was a brief discussion of when the wedding would take place. His sister had mentioned that she wanted to be married by no later than April 2025. After our first initial visit in September, my husband had mentioned to his parents that I would not be able to travel after 34 weeks per my doctor, but his mother decided to ignore this information and not address it. His sister and mother decided to plan on having the wedding in April 2025, even though they had not booked anything. His sister's fiance also lives in Texas, a 3.5-hour flight away. I briefly mentioned that I would not be able to attend in April as it would be too close to my due date, but wished them all the best in their planning. Well, February of this year rolls around, and they decided to have the wedding this upcoming April in Texas. I tell my husband that because I will be almost 37 weeks pregnant, that we would definitely not be able to go. Well, a month prior, during a huge fight that we had, his mom had told him it's okay if I don't go, but that he would have to attend. And at the time, I was not opposed to it as I thought it would be fine. But 2 weeks ago, and we met with my doctor, and I decided to ask her for advice while he was there also in the room. I then asked her for confirmation that it's not a problem if he were to travel during my 37th week. She then looks at both of us and says absolutely not. When she said that, we both shared her in shock. She continues by saying, "This would be like rolling a dice. I would not recommend it. If something were to happen, I would not be able to slow anything down." Well, he unenthusiastically agrees and says it's messed up that they picked a date knowing that we most likely will not be able to attend. It's now almost April, and he just told his mother that we will both for sure not be attending. Well, my husband and in-laws then have a huge fight, and he explains the situation. And then suddenly, his dad says that he won't be attending the wedding either if my husband is not there. But I still don't budge after he tells me this, and I calmly state that he simply cannot attend 2 weeks before my due date, as we are literally both having the baby together. So seriously, am I the jerk for not letting him attend this wedding? Because right now I don't know what to do. Okay, first off, no, you're not the jerk, but also your in-laws are idiots. They literally said, "Oh yeah, you're gonna have a baby? Yeah, don't worry about that. We're gonna get our daughter married, and my son better be there. Who cares about your baby?" It's like, dude, what are we talking about here? The doctor literally said that he cannot go to this wedding as it is way too much of a gamble. And honestly, I kind of have to agree. And the fact that your extended family is trying to fight you guys on this, while also giving some kind of like, "Oh, well, if you're not going, I'm not going," as if the whole wedding's gonna fall apart just because your husband's not going. Like, that is honestly so crazy to me. Do they not care that you're about to give birth and this really could be like detrimental to your health? Because in my opinion, it really seems like they just don't care about you. So no, you're not the jerk, because this literally is what the doctor ordered. And if they can't understand that or appreciate that, then that literally is their problem to deal with, because they're the ones that scheduled this wedding date and not you. My roommate screams at me in a way that honestly really insulted me, as he literally chased me into the street just so I would engage in his drama. So I decided to get some petty revenge by quite literally clearing out that apartment top to bottom by taking all my stuff out so that he could not enjoy anything that I had to offer. And I'm honestly so glad that I finally got away from him. Here's what happened. I split an apartment for affordability with an acquaintance and friend who turned out to be a textbook narcissist nepo baby with borderline personality traits. After an especially egregious blow-up where he yelled at me and followed me out of the house into the street screaming insults at me just to try and get me to engage in his drama, I decided I was done trying to maintain peace until the apartment contract ended soon. I then began to move out my stuff from the kitchen, bathroom, and living room. My giant beanbag that he loved to relax in, well, I gave it away. My nightstand by the couch that he had stuff in, I set his stuff on the ground and I gave it away. My decorations and plants that made it cozy, I gave it to a friend. My modem and router for the internet, well, oops, it must have stopped working. I mean, the living room was barren. The toilet paper and paper towels house I restocked because it simply wasn't worth fighting over before, well, is now hidden in my room. Even my dishes and plates that he benefited from, I store them at a friend's house, while also ensuring that the cleaning that I do to keep the shared space from being nasty just basically didn't happen anymore. At this point, I didn't care. His dishes just started piling up, and I thought to myself, oh well, not my circus. At this point, I just used the gray rock method. I went as no contact as feasible, and I avoided being home when possible until the lease ended and I could finally move out. And thankfully, I never spoke to him ever again because that guy was a nightmare to deal with. Wow, what a weirdo, seriously. This guy chased you out of the house screaming at you. And I think you're right, just from the sounds of it, it really does seem like he's some kind of like weird narcissist, literally only trying to antagonize you so he can have someone to yell at. That is seriously obnoxious, and I'm glad you got away from them, because I know for a fact I would not be able to live in that kind of situation. Today, I got some petty revenge by returning the trash that someone had illegally dumped in front of my front yard, and it was truly so satisfying to put it right back on their lawn, as it really was gross that they did this in the first place. Here's what happened. For over a decade, I rented a house that had been vacant for a while. It's an old lady's house who had passed away a couple of years ago. Her elderly daughter lived almost an hour away and had been trying to rent it out instead of selling it because the house value was still low because the housing market had not recovered after the 2008 financial crisis yet. Well, I woke up on trash day only to see two large black trash bags at the end of my driveway sitting right next to the garbage can, and I thought to myself, what in the world is going on? I then went outside and decided to rummage through them. Fortunately for me, the dumper was dumb enough to leave a piece of mail inside one of the bags that had literally their address written right on it. So I looked up the address online, and lo and behold, the address was only a mile and a half away. And since I was unemployed at the time, I had plenty of time to drive over there and give them back their trash. I wrote down the directions on a piece of paper since I didn't have a smartphone at the time, and I wouldn't get one until almost 2016. I then started driving over while thinking about what I was going to say, and I'm honestly not even sure if I thought of anything clever. So I went and I knocked on their door, but there was no answer. So I decided to chuck the bags on their lawn and go back home. A week or two later, there were some additional items like kids' toys and rocking horses next to my bin on trash day, but there were no bags with mail, so I couldn't really do anything about it. But thankfully, after that, there was no more illegal dumping, because that truly was incredibly annoying. Honestly, I can't understand why anyone would ever do this unless they're seriously trying to like hide something. Like, why would you drive a mile and a half just to throw something away? And especially on a property that probably looks like somebody lives there. Like, there's a car in the driveway, it's not like nobody's there. So the fact that they went out of their way to go to your house and be like, okay, we'll dump the trash here, like, that's really weird and kind of sketchy as well. But good for you for getting these people sorted out pretty quickly and for figuring out exactly who did this, because this kind of behavior is super gross and I don't blame you for being upset. Am I the jerk for locking my cousin out of my house after they came home at 4 o'clock in the morning after literally drinking all night with their friends on their birthday? Here's what happened. Okay, so my cousin, who we will call James, came to visit me and my husband last weekend for his birthday. We celebrated James's birthday Friday night, and on Saturday, he said he was going to go have dinner with a few of his friends in town. He specifically told me that his plans were to go have dinner with them and come back to my place afterwards to stay in and watch some movies. He left my house at around 4 o'clock p.m. and he texted me at around 7 asking when would be a respectful time to come back, as he was spending the night at my house. Well, I told him that I know it's his birthday and he is with his friends he doesn't get to see often, and he is an adult, so I'm not going to give him a curfew. I just told him to call me and let me know when he was on his way back so we can avoid him ringing the doorbell and waking up my son. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, when bars typically close, I texted him when he was going to get back, but I didn't get a reply. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I figured he was sleeping at his friend's place, so I just went to bed. And before going to bed, I texted him to let him know that in case he was still coming back, there is a spare key that he can use to get in the house. And then I went to bed. Well, at around 4 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to someone ringing our doorbell. This woke up my son and he was scared and crying. My husband and I woke up irritated. I look at the camera and James was outside ringing our doorbell. When I opened the door, James was fuming. He was mad that I had locked him out of the house when I said I would be there to let him in. I asked him why he ignored my text messages, as I told him where the spare key was, and he said his phone died and I should have just given him the keys before he left. Now, James was getting very loud, so I told him that either he can calm down and go to sleep, or he would have to find somewhere else to sleep. So James went to our guest bedroom, he grabbed his things, and he slept in the car. Fast forward, and earlier this week, I was talking to my sister about the situation, and she called me a jerk because I told James that I would wait for him and that I had made a drunk person sleep in their car. Well, I feel justified, but James is also still not talking to me. So seriously, am I the jerk in this situation? Because right now I I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, this really pisses me off because James is super irresponsible. For him to come back at 4 o'clock in the morning, ringing the doorbell as if you're supposed to wait on him hand and foot, like that is crazy in my opinion. Like he is literally inconveniencing everybody in that house and not thinking about anybody except for himself. And it's like, oh, okay, your phone died, but that's his problem and not yours. Why is the original poster somehow responsible for this guy being irresponsible? And I think the way that you handle this is perfect. This guy seriously was raising his voice at you. Like that is so uncalled for. I know for a fact if I was in your shoes, I would have kicked him out as well. I would have said to him, look, you can either calm down or you gotta go. So I really do love the fact that you did that because that absolutely was uncalled for. And in my opinion, I think James is 100% at fault in this situation. My toxic boyfriend told me that he will block me from going to South Korea if I actually follow through with breaking up with him. But after a lot of back and forth between the two of us, I'm honestly feeling very confused and I don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so my boyfriend and I have been planning to go to South Korea this year after July, but we have been fighting a lot lately, mostly because I feel like I'm being taken for granted because of money. My boyfriend always asks for things, but he knows I don't have a lot of money. He told me that I have to take care of him and that basically my money is his money. I never ask him for anything except for love, respect, and loyalty. My boyfriend said he felt taken for granted because he loves me, and this is just one of our fights that we have. Well, I tried to break it off recently with him because I don't feel that I'm being appreciated and I am being taken for granted. I'm starting to see who my boyfriend really is, and he is very jealous and very crazy. He always tells me that I am never allowed to leave this relationship. If I choose to leave, then he will come and find me. I cannot hide from him. I am his forever, and no one is allowed to have me. I want to leave this relationship because I am done with him. I am done with this constant fighting. After another one of our fights, and this fight once again went back to being taken for granted, and he was literally yelling at me, telling me that I am not allowed to break off this relationship, that he knows that I'm cheating on him. But no matter how many times I tell him that I'm not cheating, he will say to me, if you're not cheating, then you wouldn't be breaking up with me. But I just told him we are done. He then told me that because I broke his heart and do not want to be with him anymore, he will block me from entering South Korea. He told me he has friends in high places and he will contact the immigration office and put me on some kind of no entry list. And he said he will contact his lawyer as well. He then sent me a message stating that if I want to go to South Korea, then I have to go with him. He says that I have to marry him if I want to enter South Korea. And if I do not marry him, then I am not allowed to enter the country. I have been planning to go to South Korea for a long time before I even met him. And now that I have everything ready to go, I'm worried that my dreams will be stopped by a guy who cannot handle a breakup. So seriously, can he block me from entering the country? I really need some advice on this because right now I seriously don't know what to do. Oh man, this is insane. Like this guy seriously sounds crazy. He's really trying to say like, oh yeah, you can't go to South Korea unless we get married. You're never breaking up with me. You can't break up with me. If you're breaking up with me, that must mean you're cheating. Like dude, what is going on right now? This is not normal behavior. This guy is out of his mind and in my opinion, he sounds kind of dangerous. He sounds like a desperate weirdo and in my opinion, I would not take this lightly because the way he's acting is like super strange, trying to make it sound like he has ownership over you or something like that. So to state the obvious, no, this idiot can't block you from entering the country, but also like look at the subtext here because the way he's talking is super dangerous. So in my opinion, I think it would be wise to put South Korea on the back burner and maybe say to yourself, listen, I need to get away from this guy first before you ever consider going to South Korea because this guy does not sound like a very safe person in the slightest. And I think it would be safer for you altogether to get away from him and disconnect so that he can no longer negatively affect your life. Am I the jerk for kicking my brother out of my house after he literally came over there only to hook up with another girl? Here's what happened. Okay, so I live with my mom in a 3-bedroom house. My parents are recently separated, so my brother stays with my dad elsewhere in a bigger home. The spare bedroom in our 3-bedroom place also isn't fully furnished yet, and this will be relevant later on. My brother and I are fairly close, but have a strained history because I'm sort of the black sheep of the family. I am more vocal and I tend to call out BS when I see it, and I advocate for others, while my brother is less vocal about issues and tends to try to pacify and people-please situations to ease. In an odd way, this has made us closer over the years, especially during our parents' split. My mom is out of town for a week, and so I'm alone in the house. Last night, my brother and I went out with our respective friend groups and found ourselves at the same event. He was jovial and walked me around the room, proudly introducing me to all of his friends, calling me his mini-me. It was overall a really good night. He left sooner than I did, but came back asking me for the keys to the house. I figured, oh, he probably wants to have a few drinks with his friends, so I just happily gave them to him. But once I got back to the house, my friend and I walked into him with a girl. He was clearly trying trying to set a vibe and had a mood going. When I asked him if he was staying overnight, he says, "Yeah, I'm gonna take mom's bed." And I was honestly really appalled. Spending quality time with some stranger in mom's bed? I mean, seriously right now? I should note that I'm African and I come from a conservative country. I'm not bothered by him wanting to hook up, but it's jarring to me that he came into my home right as my mom is gone to then use her room to bed someone else. Like, why couldn't he have just gone to our dad's place or gotten an Airbnb or something like that? I've been going through a pretty tough time too, so all of my other emotions, topped off with the feeling that this was a disrespectful thing to do, came to a head at that moment. I then curtly asked him when he was leaving so I could lock up the house and go to bed. Once upstairs with my friend, I sent him a text stating how hurt and pissed off I was about the situation. He then soon left as I was upstairs ranting to my friend about everything, and I think he heard all of it. Granted, I was drunk, and now that I'm sober, I still feel that his intentions were disrespectful. I do feel really guilty that I may have embarrassed him, and feel that I may have wrecked our relationship for the time being. I apologize for embarrassing him, and I explained why I feel the way that I do. So honestly, am I the jerk in the situation? Because right now, I'm not sure what to do. No, I do not think that you're in the wrong at all. Your brother literally doesn't live there. He doesn't stay at your house, and the fact that he was trying to hook up in your mom's bed? Like, seriously? What's going on right now? That is so gross. So no, you're not the jerk for kicking him out, because honestly, if I was in your shoes, I would have done the exact same thing. My crazy entitled uncle broke into my house while I was sleeping, also he could steal my retro video games and video game consoles just so he can have them for himself. And as a result, I'm now in the process of getting a restraining order against my uncle so that he can never pull something like this on me ever again. Here's what happened. So to start things off, when I was younger, I was spoiled. I'm not gonna lie, I really was. I had almost every gaming console a kid could dream of, and my cousin, well, they did not. I would let them play on my consoles when they came over, but I would never let them borrow it because I was so overprotective of them, which I honestly realized was pretty dumb the older I got. Fast forward a few years, my cousin is older and has a job, so he has his own consoles and everything, but has come to collect retro consoles and games, which I had a lot of. He offers to buy some of them and I turned him down because I want to keep my memories and potentially pass them on to my kids so they can experience the games that I had. Well, this is where things kind of go south. My uncle for years basically makes it seem that my cousin is entitled to my stuff simply because of the fact that I denied him borrowing it when I was still rocking Spider-Man pajamas, and as a result, he consistently tries to pressure me into just handing them over. Late in 2022, after I moved out into my own place and have all my consoles and games in storage, my cousin, who quit asking about the consoles after like a month of me saying no by the way, comes over to visit and we're just hanging out and bonding when he gives me a housewarming gift, which was an N64 cartridge of Majora's Mask because it was our favorite game. Now, when my cousin gave me that, my uncle absolutely did not like that. Fast forward 2 nights later and I'm in bed sleeping, and it's right about then that I hear a loud click followed by a snap. I jump out of my bed looking for anything I can use as a weapon while also calling the police in the process. I slowly peek my head out and I see my uncle's bald head glaring in the moonlight, going through my stuff as quietly as he can. After about 10 minutes of him going through my stuff, the cops finally show up. We then go through a litany of questions, and I watch him get put into a cop car and all of that. He broke in through my balcony window. I come to find out later that the click I heard was from the crowbar pushing into the lock and snapping it apart on the window. Also, the window was completely spiderwebbed and basically shattered. Thankfully, when assessing the damages, nothing was stolen. Fast forward to about 2 days later, and since the incident, I've bought some cameras off of Amazon. They're not the best, but they alert my phone and they are hidden. And when it comes to pressing charges, my cousin has asked me not to press charges. He's gone through a lot since the pandemic and couldn't handling losing his pops as well. I understand it's not exactly the best response, but he is my family. But I will say I am in the process of getting a restraining order, just to ensure that my uncle never comes near my stuff ever again. That uncle sounds absolutely unhinged. I mean, he seriously took it from like 0 to 1,000 pretty quickly. Who goes from, hey, you should hand over all your stuff and give it to your cousin, all the way up to, oh, that's okay, I'll just break into your house and steal it from you anyways. Like, that is seriously insane to me, and there is quite literally no good excuse for that type of action. Like, what was this guy thinking? Did he think that he would get away with this and that he was some kind of stealthy ninja trying to steal some gaming consoles? Also, the original poster's cousin can have it for themselves? Like, give me a break. I'm starting to see why the original poster said, you know what, I'm not going to give you any of this. I'm going to keep this to myself and you're not allowed to borrow it as kids. Because I bet you with the uncle in the picture, they probably would have never gotten any of that back, and what was previously borrowed would have probably become the property of the uncle, and this guy would have never seen it again. The original poster goes on to say that the only reason they did not take any kind of action and press charges against their uncle was because their cousin stepped in. If the cousin did not step in, then they say they would have absolutely pressed charges, which honestly, I would be pressing charges anyways. If I was in the original poster's shoes and my uncle broke into my house trying to rob me blind and tried to take my gaming consoles, you know, the things that are retro and probably valuable at this point, I would be furious. Some of those consoles and game cartridges and all the stuff I've collected as a child mean a lot to me personally. So I understand where the original poster's coming from, where you want to try and keep your stuff safe and keep it out of the greedy hands of those who would want to take it and sell it off for themselves. And the uncle of this story absolutely fits the bill. So hopefully you're able to get a restraining order sooner than later, because your uncle sounds incredibly creepy, and the fact that he would break into your house for something like this is more than enough evidence for you to know that this guy is not someone that you should want in your life. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. The bar I work at in the restaurant I'm employed with is being closed down 2 months ahead of time for renovations. And not only was I blindsided by this information, I am also now stuck trying to figure out what I'm gonna do work-wise. And I'm so angry over this situation, and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So I've worked in the food industry for a good minute, about 5 to 6 years now, and I've spent the last 2 years of that bartending, and close to a year of that being at a chain restaurant that you may or may not have heard of. And let's just say that my time has been interesting. High turnover rates, bouncing between low hours to working doubles back to back, inventory being poorly handled, to the point where I'm making all my cocktails with vodka and a hope and a prayer. All this with a promise of a big renovation that'll fix everything. And this renovation has also been pushed back 4 times now. In the time I've been there, I have seen 7 bartenders and countless servers quit or get fired. And this includes managers, and who knows how many in the back of house. All this to say that it's an absolute mess. A lot of it because of poor management, as well as the owners coming in and changing up a laundry list of rules that can only come up from people who haven't worked inside a restaurant for probably the last 15 years. But this Friday tops it all. I came in after a nice refreshing weekend to see my bar now has a giant wall with a little door for staff to go through and a sign that says bar closed. I asked my manager what was going on, and they say to me, renovations are coming up, so they're getting a head start on the bar. You won't be taking any bar tops. Just make drinks for the servers. This will be the way it is until renovations officially begin in 2 months. So I asked them, what about my tips? That's more than a third of my income I'm gonna be losing out on because of this. To which, after just now finding out today, the owners say, oh well, either keep on trying to get by with your meager hourly and tip outs, or host and make drinks, but we're only gonna pay you the host wage. I am so upset. I'm furious that these people can be so callous towards someone who's stuck around when there have been so many times I should have left. Who can have such a disregard for someone who's been trying to make a living and enjoying the job while doing it? These last few days of work have been me standing behind the bar being miserable, making the few drinks that come in every other half hour. I absolutely hate it. I miss chatting with my regulars. I miss making drinks for people whose reactions I can see, as well as just talking to the people who might wander up to my bar. I even miss some of the jerks who could never be satisfied. Right now, I'm miserable, and my income has been cut because I decided 11 months ago I wanted to bartend here. I am looking for other jobs, and though I know it will be difficult, what with the hiring markets looking like they are right now, I am hopeful I can get out of this strut. It's unfortunate that I'm being driven out, but I hope at the end of all this, I'll find myself in a new bar with a management staff that will hopefully appreciate my hard work. What an awful thing to do to your employee. I mean, first off, they're closing down the bar 2 months before renovations. Like, that's just dumb if you ask me. They haven't even begun renovations and they're just like, okay, let's close the bar. Like, maybe close it down like, I don't know, a week beforehand and tell the bartender like, hey, you're gonna be losing this spot in 2 months. That way they can have some kind of proper notice to either stick around and stay or to find a new job. Like, there's no reason for them to have to suffer with their employment just because the owners are complete morons about how they're doing it. I mean, the managers had to have known what was going on beforehand. So why did nobody bother to give you a heads up in the first place? That is really low low down and incredibly dirty. So hopefully with your job hunt, everything goes well, because this place clearly did not value you as a worker, and I honestly think you can do so much better than this terrible place. I'm afraid that my boyfriend will end our relationship if I move and take a job out of state, and at this point, I don't know what to do. So for some background, I have been at my current job for less than a year, and it has been absolutely miserable. I work for the state government, and it's just a good old boy system that I wasn't ready for. I work too hard and have been told once by a manager, and then again by another manager and HR, that I am too aggressive, which is dumb, because I was holding a man accountable for something we pay him $250,000 to do a year, and it's made coming to work sad, annoying, and it is draining. Right now, I have the option to interview for a QA position that's about an hour and a half away from the house we share with roommates, and it does pay better than my current job, but still not as much as I was hoping, starting at like $55,000 a year. I was approached by the company I used to intern for, and they want me for a QA management position, which could start out at $80,000 a year, but it is in Pennsylvania, and we currently live in Kentucky. Before I decided I didn't want to go to grad school, I was talking about going away, and he said long distance wasn't worth it, and we probably would have to break up if I did go long distance. Him saying that alone gives me so much anxiety around telling him that if they offered, I might move to get a better job, but I just know he is going to say I am not prioritizing our relationship or prioritizing him by moving. But honestly, when do I get to be the priority? I would never hold my significant other back from an opportunity that would help them excel in life. The company I would work for out of state would even help me get my master's degree if I wanted. Is there any way when I talk to him about it to make him understand that the long distance would be only temporary and that we could do it, and that he should want what's best for me? I mean, I know those relationships are hard, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm just so sad at the fact that I think he would end our relationship if I did have to move long distance. I truly have loved him more than anyone else, and I don't want anything else, but I also want to be successful in my lifetime. What should I do? It honestly is kind of a catch-22. On one hand, you're around your boyfriend and you're able to enjoy his company face to face, but at the same time, you really do hate your current job, and you've already been mislabeled as something that you're not at work, simply by trying to do your job. And that's not fair in the slightest. That really isn't. So to that end, I really don't blame you for trying to find a new job and better yourself and your career. And you know what? If you did get an offer from this other place, and they gave you the added bonus of getting your master's degree taken care of, then man, that would be a big wasted opportunity to not say yes, especially if this isn't a career that you want to excel in. So with that in mind, and with all things considered, it's honestly really disappointing to see your boyfriend basically being like, oh, if you move far away from Kentucky, we're gonna have to break up. It's almost like he just doesn't care about your situation in the slightest, and he's only judging the situation off of what would be considerate and convenient for him, despite the fact that you're miserable at your job. And while yes, long distance relationships really can work, but both parties have to be on board, and it really does sound like your boyfriend would not be up for that. So honestly, if I was in your shoes and a job offered me not only a good job out of state, but also with the opportunity that they would help me get my master's degree taken care of, you better believe I'm gonna go for that degree and pursue my passions to the best of my ability. There is no way I would let up that opportunity in the slightest. You deserve it to yourself, as well as the hard work you put in just to get a 4-year degree in the first place, which by the way is not easy and it's not for everybody. So hopefully there's some kind of middle ground you can make with your boyfriend, because the way he's acting is really unfair for your goals and your aspirations. And I really think you deserve a lot better than getting treated like garbage at work and being miscategorized as someone who's aggressive when you're just trying to hold people accountable and be the upstanding worker that you know you can be. My girlfriend is making me feel awful about still living at home, and it really hurt my feelings, and I seriously don't know what to do. So my girlfriend of almost a year is making me feel pretty awful about my living situation. She is so kind and loving and understanding, but she doesn't realize how much this is hurting me. She doesn't come from a great family, and they kicked her out as soon as she turned 18. So she was thrown right into independence way before she should have been. I, on the other hand, have a very helpful and loving family. I dropped out of college 7 years ago, and time has kind of flown by. I have never had a girlfriend before, so I really didn't spend much time planning a future or a timeline. I was just kind of seeing where things were gonna go. My girlfriend told me when we first started dating that she's looking for something serious. She wants to get married, she wants to have kids, and she wants this in the next few years. I agreed, and I said I am looking for the same. I also have a decent paying job right now, so it's not like I'm just laying around not doing anything. She told me that before we move in together, I should spend time living alone by myself so I can learn about finances and expenses. I applied for one apartment on Zillow and didn't hear anything back, so I kind of just gave up. But I do want to move in with her though. My parents pay pretty much all of my bills except for my car. They pay my insurance, my food, my phone bill, etc. They also deal with all the insurance specifics. I have been trying to find my own insurance, and my girlfriend seems to look down on me when I struggle to do it or attempt to apply. Since I'm on their current medical insurance right now, my mom helps me find a doctor since they're in her network. She was a bit rude when she was explaining the cost of living to me, and I told her I don't really know how much groceries cost since my family pays for them. She said to me, "You really don't know how much toilet paper costs?" Or even complaining to me that I don't know how much my phone bill is. I feel so judged, and she needs to realize that barely anybody her age is doing what she's doing. All of my friends live at home right now, and some don't even have jobs and do nothing with their life. But I'm honestly really heartbroken by the things that my girlfriend said, and I seriously don't know what to do. Honestly, I think to an extent your girlfriend has a point. For some context, the original poster is 26 in this story, and I think if you want to be seen as some kind of serious relationship option for this lady, you really do need to get your stuff figured out. And that includes knowing how to pay for your bills, which by the way, you don't do a lot of that at all. You've never lived alone, you don't even make your own doctor's appointments. I mean, with all things considered, despite the fact that she was maybe a little bit rude about it, I think she has a solid point. Also, it really sounds like you're not taking any steps to be more independent. Like, yeah, she got kicked out when she was 18 years old, and she had to basically figure life out as it went, and that is definitely not an easy way to go about life, and it can be jarring and really frustrating. But you know what? If she can make it work, then so can you. So maybe looking for an apartment of your own and learning how to pay for basic bills and stuff like that, as well as knowing the basic cost of living, would probably go a really long way for you. And I don't think this has to do with the fact that you live at home. I think it's more to the fact that you don't do any necessary adult things, even though you're an adult in the house. So instead of sulking about it, I think you just need to listen to what she's saying. Just be humble about it and try and see where she's coming from. Because I don't think she's saying these things to make you feel bad about yourself, but rather it really does sound like she's trying to help you move forward with your life. And I really have to disagree with what you're saying when you said that barely anyone her age is doing what she's doing. That is so incorrect, it's not even funny. There are many independent people who are much younger than her, who are more put together and more independent than what you're describing. So hopefully you can apply yourself and be the man that she's looking for. Because what you've described right now is really sheltered, and it really seems like you're in a bubble. And hopefully sooner than later, you can figure out what it means to be an adult and provide for yourself. My entitled boss demands that I ship equipment to him that he literally would just have to ship across the country again just to get it to its proper location. And after having my job getting laid off, I decided to maliciously comply. And as a result, I cost the company hundreds of dollars in the process. And it truly felt amazing. Here's what happened. A couple of years ago, I took a fantastic job as an IT manager in a remote role for a healthcare company. It was the best job I'd ever had. The best salary, the total freedom. I had a wonderful boss who trusted me to do my job. I was brought on to create an internal IT team, and this was for a company that had 19 offices in 3 US states. And I was given free reign to create the team I saw fit. I hired a great admin for both our California and Missouri markets, and I served that role for Alabama. The employees loved us. Most tickets were resolved in an hour or two, instead of the outsourced company taking a day or two, and maybe not even fixing the issue in itself. We were saving the company close to $500,000 per year just in outsourced costs versus the salaries that they provide us. It was absolutely glorious, but my boss ended up deciding to become a stay-at-home dad. I was looking to advance to his position, but our new CEO instead created a new vice president of IT position for a guy she had worked with for 7 previous years. Sadly, the new guy was the micromanager of all micromanagers. He had the company credit card closed, and I went from discretionary limit of $10,000 all the way down to having to ask for his approval on $10 network cables. He put himself on every account, removed most of my authority, and in effect, I was basically demoted. One day, I visited one of our sites and picked up a bunch of stuff. 5 desktop PCs, a carton full of keyboards, mice, and cables, weird odds and ends. The idea was that I would take it to one of our other facilities and store it there, save the desktop PCs that I would ship to our outsourced partner. Well, I went on vacation, only to come home to discover discover that the previous Friday had been my last day. I was getting 2 weeks severance, and they were eliminating the department entirely. I asked the vice president about the equipment, and he told me to ship all of it to him, and he would dispense of it. Now, I assumed he wanted me to ship it to the outsource company, or at least to do so with the PCs, but no. The thing is, the vice president lives in Colorado. We have no branches there. The outsource partner is in Missouri, meaning that no matter what, he would at least be reshipping those PCs to Missouri. Oh well, not my problem anymore. I went to FedEx and I carted all that garbage in there. They offered me various methods, but I told them that it was all going on the company's account. I told them to ship it ground, but to do so in whatever method made them the most money. Friends, they spent well over 3 hours carefully wrapping and padding all of that equipment. It charged the company several hundreds of dollars. By my best estimate from previous shipping that I had done with them, it was about triple of what it should have been. And of course, the vice president also had to pay to ship those desktops again. But hey, he told me to do it. The company held my severance until they got the equipment, so I guess I satisfied their requirements or something like that. But now I've moved on to better things than those people. I did have to take a small pay cut, and it did take me 3 months to find a good job, but I did find that good job, and I honestly couldn't be happier to be away from the people that I previously worked for. That is honestly so funny to me, and really is hilarious when it comes to maliciously complying to some sort of manager. Oh, you want me to ship it all the way to you in Colorado, even though this gear needs to go to Missouri? Cool, we're gonna do this in the most expensive way possible, and it's coming out of your budget because guess what? I don't work there anymore. So while I'm sorry that the original poster lost their job, and under stupid circumstances at that, at least you were able to get the last word by costing this company hundreds of dollars in the process. Because based on what you described, they deserve this kind of bad karma to come their way. My entitled mother would barge into my house anytime she wanted, whether I was there or not, and then go rummaging through my belongings as if she owned the place. And after dealing with this for so many years, I finally put my foot down and told her to stop, and as a result, she went ballistic on me. Here's what happened. So my mother has always had a hard time with boundaries. Growing up, she was fond of telling me it was her room because it was her house, and she could come and go as she pleased and snoop through my space at will. The same with my car or my phone or anything else. No matter if I was paying for it with my own money or not, she had rights to everything. After I got married and moved across the country, she followed a year later just to be close, in case I might need her. She settled in a town about an hour away, and I saw her a few times a month. She was generally a good grandmother, very involved, and nobody could say she didn't love my daughter a ton. She was given a key to my house for various reasons and didn't overuse it too much, but she had a hard time recognizing that I was an adult now, and I made the rules for my own children, not her. Mild things like wanting to hand feed my 7-year-old and telling me I should allow things that I did not, as well as arguing with me in front of her about my rules, that kind of stuff. After I separated from my ex-husband and moved into my own house with my daughter, she was again given a key for emergencies, and this is when she started to cross some lines. She would go shopping and drop things off at my house, still an hour away from her own house, and just leave bags of things in various places. She's always been a bit of a compulsive shopper and a hoarder, if I'm being completely honest, but these things were usually useful. Cases of paper towels, bottles of laundry detergent, piles of conditioner, that kind of thing. But she'd just show up unannounced and leave things in my house, usually in my unfinished basement floor. The basement flooded every time it rained for half an hour, and these things frequently got wet or ruined. I asked her to stop multiple times because I was tired of throwing away soaked rolls of toilet paper, but she continued doing it the whole time I lived there. It was incredibly frustrating. Then I moved back across the country, and she again came with me, actually living in my house for a few months until she could find her own. And this was an absolute disaster. Her old space-invading behavior from my childhood came roaring back into my life. She would barge into my bedroom and my bathroom without knocking. She would argue with me about my parenting and openly disparage me to my child when I wasn't around. She would buy 15 bottles of dishwashing liquid because they were on sale and got angry when I told her I didn't need them. I eventually asked her to move out for the sake of our relationship. She did find her own place, but kept the key to my house. Her random drop-ins increased to multiple times a week. I would come home to whatever random haul she brought that day just sitting on my table, or she would need to borrow a carving knife and just let herself in while I was at work to go grab it. I'd be in the shower and get out to find her in my kitchen, having not gotten an answer when she knocked, so she just let herself in with my key. I asked her to stop so many times. I don't like unannounced visitors, and I hate knowing that someone was in my house without me being there. But she continued unbated. She let herself in at one point and went through my daughter's things, which prompted my daughter to ask me if she could confront her grandmother and ask her to not do that again. But my mother went ballistic when that happened and said that she would give the key back, but she never did. She continued to show up randomly, but now saying that she knew she should have called first and just forgot. My daughter and I moved again last summer, and I was adamant that my mother was not going to get a key to my house or the security code. She has continued to show up randomly, and my significant other opened the door a few times, mostly because he isn't as good at hiding as my daughter and I are. Because if he's not home, we don't answer. She showed up unannounced last week with stuff for Valentine's Day. I work from home, so I was here. I was also on a conference call, so I didn't go to the door. My significant other happened to be home and opened it for her. So she came in and chatted for about 10 minutes and then left. And this was the last straw for me. I'm over these surprise visits, especially when I'm working and my bosses can hear my dogs going nuts because someone new is in my house. So I texted her and I told her for the 100th time to please stop. I don't care what the occasion is or what she had to drop off. Just stop showing up to my house unannounced. This is a boundary that she needs to respect. And then, as you probably guess, she loses her mind. She starts screaming at me and saying, "You're a controlling brat and you can't tell me what to do. I was just trying to do something nice for Valentine's Day. And you know what? I hope you have a child in the future that's so hateful and mean as you are." And when she said this, it was honestly awful but so needed. She further went on to say that she won't do anything else for me ever again. She's having surgery next week and needed to talk to me about it. She has a supposed very busy schedule that day and lots of places to go, so that's why she couldn't call or text me first. She planned on just leaving the candy on the front porch, but my significant other opened the door, so it's his fault. And she just kept going on and on. I finally told her I wouldn't be reading or responding any further, and she just responded by saying, "Good, that's fine." Fast forward, and the silence for the last 10 days has been golden, but I feel like the teenager in a scary movie who mistakenly thinks the villain with the axe is gone, only for them to pop out of the closet later. So hopefully she respects my boundaries, because I honestly don't want to deal with her in that capacity ever again. Your mom seriously was violating your boundaries, like no joke. She followed you across the country multiple times just to be next to you so she could literally bother you. And there's no other way of putting it. She would straight up just barge into your house while you weren't there, or even while you're in the shower, just to grab stuff that she wanted. And that's not fair for you or anybody else in the slightest. That is such a violation of privacy, it's not even funny. But even in that same vein of thought, I don't blame you for giving your mom multiple chances to try and be somewhat reasonable. I mean, it is your mom after all. But with that considered, it's really inappropriate for her to be barging into your house while you're not there just to get stuff, or to drop off stuff that you don't need. That is incredibly obnoxious, and honestly, I don't blame you for setting these boundaries and telling her to please stop. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My best friend cut me off out of nowhere, and I'm really hurt and offended, and I seriously don't know what to do. So as the title suggests, I'm blocked on everything. I knew her for 14 years and knew her entire family, which I got really close to. A few years ago, I got really sick. She stepped up and went above and beyond for me. She made medical decisions for me when I wasn't able to, and I honestly don't think I would be here today if it wasn't for her. She implied that she didn't approve of the new guy in my life. She told me that when him and I start dating, she's done. Now, this guy has been nothing but supportive throughout this weird time. In the past, I'd been in relationships, both romantic and platonic, that didn't make me happy. Before I got sick, I was actively working on improving myself. I was going to therapy, I was getting into hobbies, I stayed single, etc. I told her this and more, and she disagreed. She said there was real-life consequences to me being in a relationship. A few months went by, and she said that I misinterpreted our conversation, which I know I didn't. She said that I was only attracted to him because of my unhealed trauma, because he wasn't a heartthrob. To avoid back and forth, I just agreed. She said that we're different people, which we'd always joke about, and it doesn't make sense for us to be friends. I didn't argue with her because it was clear that she wanted out. I thanked her for everything, and I told her that I loved her and that I didn't want to lose her. She wished me the best of luck and said that I can contact her if stuff goes down, and then she just straight up blocked me. I am at such a loss right now. I don't understand what could have led to this. I'm still dealing with the aftermath of being ill, and I can confidently say that I can't imagine exiting someone else's life that I care about while they're ill. Her cousin just blocked me on social media as well, and I can't help but think that I've done something wrong. What should I do? It really does seem like the original poster's friend is kind of being a jerk right now. Like they're just cutting him off all of the sudden without any kind of context as to what's happening. So that to me kind of screams that there's some information we're not being told. Is there a reason why she doesn't want you to be in a relationship right now? Or is there something about the guy that she just doesn't approve of? And so she's saying, sorry, but we can't be friends if you're with them. There's something that's not quite being said that really just says to me that maybe the original poster isn't telling the full truth right now. But regardless, it really does sound like an unfortunate situation because it sounds like the original poster really did love this friend. I mean, the friend was even willing to step up and make medical decisions for them just to make sure that they're alive and healthy. Like that is a seriously big deal. So I really can't understand why you would be so attached to this person and why you would be so sad to see them go. But I really don't like the method in which this friend is leaving. They're deciding, hey, if things go really wrong, you can contact me, but otherwise you're blocked. It seems like there should have been more of a discussion involved in this instead of just being like, hey, I'm gonna block you. Oh, and by the way, my cousin's gonna block you as well. Which means to me that the original poster's friend is talking to basically everybody else about your situation besides you. And that, in my opinion, is super toxic. So whatever the truth may be, hopefully it all works out for you because either this is really not a good friend to begin with, or she really is trying to look out for your best interest. My best friend and I wanted to share an apartment together for our last year of university, but the day we're supposed to move in, she ran away and refused to move in. And now our relationship is slowly starting to strain, all the way to the point where she's completely ghosting me and I no longer have any contact with her. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So to start things out, we knew each other for 2 years. We attended the same college together and even went on vacation together this summer. She originally lived 7 hours away with her boyfriend and moved back and forth every few months just to attend classes at university. Because it was going into our last semester, we planned to move in together for the remaining months. We rented a place without seeing it in person, only via Zoom. The minute she arrived, she wanted to move out. It really was a cute place, but her boyfriend who was there to help felt sick. He had an allergy to mold. Even though they couldn't find any, she decided that was enough to not want to live here. Her reason was that her boyfriend would never be able to visit her. I felt so hurt, but I understood and quickly organized someone else since I couldn't afford to pay rent by myself. And it turned out I clicked extremely well with my new flatmate. She and I spent every 1 to 2 days together. My BFF got jealous and told me she wanted to see me every day and that I should ask for meetups since she didn't want to get on my nerves. I only asked once a week though because that was enough for me. After 3 months, she broke down crying as to why she was second priority now. I explained I naturally spend more time with my flatmate because we live together and that I got busy with university and if she wanted to do more, she could propose something directly, but she rarely did. She felt guilty for leaving me alone in the apartment and I comforted her. I was not angry. Also, she complained that once I asked her to hang out after my flatmate canceled and I invited her to meet in threes a few times. All of that made her feel less worthy. She also got hurt because I didn't answer her for 2 days when she tried to reach out, and this happened several times. I apologized to her and I explained that I fell into a depressive episode during the exam phase. It's totally my fault, so I really was sorry. I did my best to reconcile and answer quickly, and eventually I thought things were better, but I was wrong. She turned down almost all invitations I sent to meet alone, and she now ignored my text messages for days at a time. On her last day of university, she eventually called me again. She felt uncomfortable in our friendship. Things got better over the last few weeks, but couldn't make up for the weeks before. I apologized again and promised to keep showing attention. I bought flowers, I drove to her house, and I said my goodbyes. After she moved, I asked her if I could visit her the following months, but she overread my text message and only texted me organizational stuff for university. So I asked her again if she's got any time so I could come and visit, but she didn't know. She promised to tell me soon though, and after that, I never heard from her since, and that was about 1 month ago. Since then, I've texted her twice, telling her a harmless inside joke from our vacation, as well as 2 weeks later, stating that I miss her. She is active on social media, so I know she's alive and well. I just feel so helpless and I know that I kinda messed up. What should I do? Honestly, this is kind of a messy situation, but the fact that your friend is throwing away your friendship all because you spent more time with your flatmate instead of her, who by the way walked out on you when you were trying to get the apartment set up, is in my opinion completely selfish. She's trying to claim there's mold in the apartment, but you then have no evidence to try and corroborate that claim? Like, come on, that's ridiculous. She put you in a really weird situation, and thankfully you were able to come out on top. And it's not like you were ignoring her or anything like that. You were just busy with university in your last year. Senior year of college is probably the most stressful in some cases. You're about to start a career, you're trying to finish on time and graduate, you're trying to get passing grades. There was a lot on your plate. I don't think any reasonable person would blame you for being busy. And also, it really seems like you were second place to her boyfriend as well. And she instead wanted you to prioritize all of your time towards her. And that's not fair in the slightest. She would always expect you to initiate stuff and would expect you to go out of your way to try and organize stuff in your free time. But she would never be willing to do the same on her end. So honestly, I just would not worry about this. If this is the end of your relationship, despite the fact that you tried to make amends for any supposed offense that you may have caused, then I truly think that's on your friend, because you've honestly done everything right in my opinion. And if she wants to ghost you and act this way, then truly that's on her. My fiance suggested a break, and now I'm conflicted on how to respond, and I seriously don't know what to do. My fiance and I have been together for almost 5 years and engaged for over a year. She had a lot of emotional problems growing up and has been diagnosed with CPTSD, among other mental health conditions. She recently stated to me that she feels like she loves me, but isn't in love with me. I can normally tell when she's having a good mental health day versus when it's a bad mental health day, and I tried to explain to her that I think those feelings are coming from her condition, because I can see the way her eyes light up and she gets excited just looking at me, or talking about our wedding or our future together, as well as future kids on her good days. While skeptical at first, she told me that her therapist seems to agree with me, saying she believes those are intrusive thoughts coming about because of her PTSD and not her actual thoughts or feelings. For full disclosure, during this time, I realized that I put my job first over her. This was not intentional, but working 50 to 60 hours a week, I would come home mentally and physically exhausted, and we didn't have the time to ourselves, whether in the house or out and about like we used to. I apologized profusely, and I promised to be better and make time for her as well as the both of us, like I had done before we got engaged. Now fast forward a few weeks later, and she suggested that we need a break. She said she needed time to figure out her stuff and make sure that it truly was intrusive thoughts and not how she actually felt. She said that we've never spent more than a week apart since we started dating, and that absence makes the heart fonder, and that after a couple weeks away, she would realize I was giving her what she needed and would come back. I'm just so lost on if she's so confident that she'll come back after the break, then why is the break even necessary in the first place? However, she's also suggested that she feels like she may be missing out and doesn't want any regrets when she gets married, because I'm the only guy she's ever done more than kiss with. How do I react and talk her through this? I'm obviously not a mental health expert, nor can I read her mind, but I'm convinced that I know her true feelings may be better than her right now. I would do anything for her, and I'm willing to give her the space if she needs it to try and figure out her thoughts, but I'm terrified I'm going to lose her, especially if there's any consideration to meet up with others during the break. It's honestly so confusing and so frustrating, and I seriously don't know what to do. First off, I want to say that this guy was dating her when she was 18 and he was 24. So I think the original poster needs to realize that quite literally, her entire adult life has been with this person. The original poster, for context, is almost 30 years old. They are probably very secure in what they want out of life, and they basically have probably seen enough to know what's going on. His girlfriend, on the other hand, is only 23 years old, and they haven't been with anybody else in their life. And also, she is only 23 years old, and she's possibly getting married to you. Like, I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but I don't think you can possibly blame her for wanting to pump the brakes and reassess her situation. So hopefully things work out for you, because from the sounds of it, there's a lot of emotional turmoil that's going on right now, and it really does sound like this is something that she needs to work out. Today, I messed up by not apologizing to our farmer neighbors and likely ruining my parents' retirement home forever. Here's what happened. So I tried to get advice on this and stick to my principles of not offering an apology when not in the wrong, but I think it's become clear that I messed up, and I could have prevented this with a better attitude. I'm an 18-year-old female and I live with my parents, and we moved last year from a big city to a cheaper, more rural rural community in the Midwest. Since my dad's retired now and money goes further here, I'm also gonna finish up my last year of high school here. We have by far the smallest lot out here, and most of our neighbors are farmers with quite a bit of land. I don't feel like we fit in well with the neighbors, and have had some arguments with some of them and their kids. They're up early in the morning, making noise every single morning with farm machinery, and they even yelled at me for listening to rap music too loud in the car late at night, even though it was only 9 o'clock or so. And this was with a friend in high school. And most recently, they let one of their cows go into our yard when it was grazing, while I was out in the backyard, and I gave them a dirty look and stood there while they tried to get it back. Recently, I guess he talked to my dad and gave him some sort of redneck, "we don't take kindly to your behavior" kind of speech, and that wasn't how things operated around these parts, and they wanted me to apologize. So my dad asked me to, but I refused because I think they're in the wrong towards me. I saw him out back one day, and he asked me if I had anything to say about my attitude, and I said to them, "I haven't done anything wrong to you. I just think you should respect other people's property and boundaries." So he said to me, "All right then, have it your way," and just walked off. Well, my dad and I left town for spring break, but when we came back, we noticed construction was heavily underway. It was almost complete, and it was on a large shed structure right up against the property line, maybe 20 feet from our house. My mom asked a woman who lives a bit further down if they knew what it was about, and they said, "Oh yeah, I guess the word is that they've had some trouble with your daughter, and they've made the decision to put in a pig barn." My parents freaked out when they heard this, and they asked around and heard this was a known tactic to drive out unwanted neighbors, and it was very effective. My dad called the city and asked about odor nuisance laws and what can be done, but was told that the area is zoned agriculture and that it was more of an honor system thing, that farmers wouldn't do that without more land. But technically, he was allowed to have up to 200 pigs on the property. He asked the neighbor if he would reconsider, but he said that the order of pigs is already scheduled and his mind was made up. Now my dad is furious with me and frantic about what to do. At first, I told him to just ignore it and let them do what they're gonna do. But from the people I've talked to online, they're saying that's probably not going to be possible for us. I thought he was overreacting at first, but now I'm facing the prospect that I really did crash the value of their property for good and that we're all about to be very miserable. They finished construction on the barn, so I guess the moment of truth is finally on its way. What an awful thing to do to somebody. Like seriously, that is awful. Here you have people who are just trying to mind their own business, and they're literally just trying to live their lives. And sure, the original poster was kind of being rude a little bit, I guess, but as far as we can tell, they only played loud music at like 9 o'clock in their car. Like that's really not that bad. And they may have given a dirty look to somebody in their backyard. So it's really bizarre to me that this farmer would be so thin-skinned that they have to be like, "You need to apologize right now, or else I'm gonna build a pig barn right next to your house." Like, talk about the overreaction of the century. Here's an idea. Maybe keep your stupid cow off of other people's property and leave people alone. Let them live their lives. Unless there's other things going on that the original poster clearly did not share with the class, it doesn't sound like anything they did would warrant this kind of overreaction. So hopefully all of this works out for you, because honestly, I really do see you guys moving in the next few months, because living in that kind of environment next to pigs and all of their waste, if you know what I mean, is going to be absolutely miserable, and there's no way that's gonna work in the slightest. An entitled Karen prevents a cancer patient from ringing the celebratory bell that would state that they are cancer-free, and instead demands that her spoiled child should ring the bell instead, claiming that their stupid child deserves to ring this bell way more than this recovering cancer patient. And I've never seen this level of cruelty and entitlement in my entire life. Here's what happened. So I first off want to say there's so many good things happening in my life, and one of those being that my body is cancer-free. But with the good comes the bad, as well as this mind-boggling encounter that happened as I was leaving the clinic this morning. I was just a witness, and the lady who was the target of Mama Karen and the entitled brat was happy for me to share this with the world. So for those of you unfamiliar with a cancer ward or a clinic where chemo is administered, and I pray you always will be unfamiliar with it, there is a little brass bell. The bell is a symbol of hope for all. It marks the end of treatment and the ringing in of a new chapter, and that new chapter is hopefully cancer-free. For me, I vomited right before I rang the bell because the anxiety of the unknown was almost as bad as chemo itself. But that's a story for another time. Today, it was Jane's turn to ring the bell. Jane is not her real name. Jane is a really lovely lady story. She's 58 years old with stage 2 ovarian cancer. She had a hysterectomy followed by chemo. Jane's diagnosis is great, but she's had it rough. During the hysterectomy, she almost bled out due to undiagnosed complications, and this left her hospitalized for over 3 weeks. It delayed her treatment by over a month and left her fearing for the worst. Jane really is the most lovely woman you could ever meet. She's the grandma that everyone wants to have, but is kind of glad that they don't. She's funny and loving, but can give you a look that makes you back away like you're staring down a hungry grizzly bear. Everyone that interacts with Jane loves her, and honestly, the woman saved my sanity on more than one occasion during my treatment. Another thing that may differ from ward to ward is the chemo room itself. The patients in ours sit in a little oval room that's like a giant lounge with comfy chairs and a little TV. There are drinks and biscuits off to one side and room enough for 10 patients and up to 2 visitors. As I was leaving my appointment, I saw Jane's daughter, who informed me today was the day, so I decided to stick around to see her ring the bell, and I am so glad that I did. A couple weeks ago, a new patient joined the group. We will call him Sam. That's not his real name. Sam seems like a relatively nice older gentleman with an absolute awful excuse of a daughter and a grandchild. In the limited interactions I've had with these two entitled brats, I've seen the daughter stealing biscuits off of people who are currently hooked up to chemo machines, as well as the mother screaming at nurses for reprimanding the child when she attempted to rip the cannulas out of patients' arms. I genuinely have no idea why the facility hasn't banned this entitled Karen and her stupid brat. Well, like I said, today was the day that Jane would ring the bell. Unlike some places where the bell is on the wall, our unit has a little old-fashioned brass bell that the nurses keep behind the desk 90% of the time. Today, just as Jane was getting ready to hopefully walk out for the final time, the nurse brought the bell over to the little side table. At first, the little fallen angel didn't notice the bell. She was too busy attempting to crush the souls of the elderly, as well as the souls of the sick, by playing with her switch. Not loud enough to be kicked out, but just loud enough to be annoying and incredibly distracting. Once Jane was ready, the nurse stood by the little side table and made a short speech about Jane and her final day of the journey. Just as the speech was wrapping up, the tiny terror shot out of nowhere, almost knocking Jane to the ground. She reached up and grabbed the bell. Now Jane, being the no-nonsense granny that she is, took the bell out of baby Beelzebub's hands and firmly but gently said, "No, honey, that isn't for you. It's not a toy." And my gods, did that unleash some kind of mythological demon? Because the screech that child released at being told no was loud enough to shatter glass. This entitled brat lunged at Jane, trying to grab the bell from her hand. All the while, the entitled Karen of a mother stood there and started screaming at Jane. She started to say, "You can't do that. She's an innocent child. What kind of disgusting woman takes a toy from an innocent child? You're a horrible person. Give her back that bell right now. You don't need it. She deserves it more." Honestly, this entitled Karen and all the things she was saying was a lot. It also wasn't even a conversation. I'm pretty sure she just growled it all in one breath. The heartbeat screeches went on for about 30 seconds of just incomprehensible nonsense. Eventually, Bertha Big Mac waddled her way over to Jane to try and take the bell from her. But Jane did not have time for this stupid lady. Jane's got a bell to ring and a life to live. So as this rampaging rhino gets up to Jane, Jane goes full heathen mode on her. She looks this entitled Karen dead in the eye and says to her something I honestly will never forget. She says, "Your father must have been the bad guys during World War II in his past life if he got to be lumped up with such a sorry excuse for a daughter." And when she said this took everybody by surprise, as there was a brief pause before Jane unleashed everything that she had been wanting to say to this Cerberus. Jane continued, "Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to finish a round of treatment with you and your obnoxious brat around, making everybody's lives miserable? I know God is testing us, but my God, we already have cancer now. Do I have to be saddled up with you two as well? You are disgusting. You are entitled and you are selfish. You are poorly behaved and your child is just as awful as you are." And I hate saying that to an innocent child, but my God, she's awful. I've never hated children before until I met yours, because she's truly that awful. She's not been kicked out of school because the teachers are targeting her. She's been kicked out of school because she's an entitled bully, just like her entitled stupid mother. And if you want any hope of her having a decent life, you'd better become a decent parent and correct some of her behavior. But oh, that's right, that would require correcting your own behavior. You disgusting, abominable excuse for a human being. It was glorious, awful, awkward, awkward and silent. Betty Big Mouth had suddenly been struck dumb. The tantruming Tara was gaping like a fish out of water. And then there was Sam. Sam broke the silence when he started laughing, like a deep belly, full-bodied laugh. The entitled Karen looked horrified. She was angry, mystified, and humiliated as her father laughed hysterically. And to be fair, I don't think any of us knew how to react. And what felt like an hour but was most likely just about a minute, Sam stopped laughing and told his daughter and granddaughter that they can either sit down and shut up or go wait in the car. He then told Jane to go ahead and ring the bell. The slain beast and her stupid kids slinked back to their seats, where they both sat shell-shocked, while Jane rang the bell. We clapped, some of the cheap seats clapped a little too enthusiastically, and then Jane, her daughter, and I sauntered out of the room. Jane and I parted ways at the hospital entrance, and I wish her the world of luck, but I have a feeling that she won't need it. If you can slay 2 Karens in one 90-second rant, cancer is nothing. I love Jane, but my God, I'm so glad she isn't my grandma. Jane is absolutely amazing. I think when you go through that much turmoil and that much anxiety towards an illness that you have, dealing with an entitled Karen and their stupid brat is probably the least of your worries. She handled that like a pro. She let out every frustration she's been dealing with and let them know exactly what was up. And honestly, it was so well deserved. That entitled Karen and her stupid child were so out of line, it's not even funny. Like, there's literally no excuse that would excuse the way they were acting. And I'm so surprised that Sam didn't decide to step in and try and correct his daughter and granddaughter a little bit earlier. You would think he would at least notice what was going on and tell them, hey, you need to get lost. So honestly, I wish Jane the absolute best of luck, and hopefully this cancer is gone forever. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My girlfriend keeps trying to force me to be friends with her sister's fiance, despite the fact that he's incredibly toxic and has stabbed me in the back multiple times. But despite it all, she won't let it go and demands that I gather some kind of friendship with this guy. And now I seriously don't know what to do. So since the beginning of this relationship, my girlfriend keeps trying to get me to be friends with her sister and her sister's fiance. Well, from the start, we never meshed well due to how different her family is, and I was honestly pretty quiet and reserved. Initially, it was a cultural shock for me because I am white and they are all Chinese. I kind of picked up on some things that were happening concerning interactions with her sister, as well as her fiance. For the sake of privacy, we'll call her sister Jane and her fiance John. Towards the beginning of the relationship, one of the things that my girlfriend would try to do would be to get us to game together on mobile games, because that's how they interacted with each other and bonded. So she figured it would be a great way to get to know them. Now, I tried to get into the same games with them, but I felt like I was an outcast because I was so new to the game and that I couldn't really enjoy the game, and I felt like I was ruining the dynamic. I felt this way because everyone would get super silent whenever I would lose or do something that was dumb in-game. So initially, gaming didn't really work out, and I feel like they kind of used that to form an image of me like I was some kind of idiot, incapable of being productive in regards to the team. As time went on, we randomly would go out to eat at restaurants, and I felt like John was ignoring me a lot of the times in conversations, because every time I tried to engage with everyone at the table, he would basically gloss over what I'd say and make the focus back onto him. Then there were times where I would reach out to John to try and get another male opinion on my relationship with my girlfriend, because my girlfriend mentioned John was like a brother to him. So I assumed that he'd be a good resource since he knew my girlfriend much better than I did at the time, due to being involved in her life for the past 3 years prior to us dating. He basically was like a brother in my girlfriend's eyes, and I used that as a reason to confide in him. Well, we had a personal conversation about an issue at one point, and he basically stabbed me in the back by telling her sister what I said and even completely twisted my own words so that I was viewed as this absolute jerk of a person trying to take advantage of my girlfriend. Word got back to my girlfriend, then eventually me, and initially I said to myself, what in the world is going on? But I just accepted it and I moved on. I always had this thought in the back of my head that John was jealous of me because of all these weird reasons I couldn't quite pinpoint, especially due to breaking the bro code. And I thought to myself that maybe he viewed me as a threat, so that seemed like a logical reason why he did not want to engage with me. Before I came into the picture 2+ years ago, it was only those three who supposedly were super close, and she could go to John for help with her family or life issues. So hearing this initially, I'd reach out to John for help because I don't talk to any of my family and I don't have anyone who I can go to go-to for issues like that. I always felt like he spoke to me in a very condescending tone and viewed me as if I was beneath him due to my in-game abilities and my awkward reservedness that stems from anxiety. I've tried multiple times to reach out and actually personally try to be a friend with this guy. For example, he took his car to a family mechanic, and the mechanic basically destroys his engine during a rebuild, which basically left his car sitting in a garage ever since that point. I took it upon myself to go over one day, call up a car buddy who works on cars, and put those two in contact with each other so that he can get his car fixed. I also went over, helped him install this roof rack that he was struggling with on his car because he looked like he could use a second set of hands. I do these things because I truly try to be a good friend, because no one does these types of things for me. All I've ever felt like is that I was used for someone else's personal gain, because he never reaches out to me on his own accord, only when it's convenient for him. This guy John proved to me that he doesn't view me as a friend because he only contacts me to help him since I have tools or something along those lines. He's never called me or asked me how I was or if I wanted to join him in doing any other kind of activity. I have contacted this guy multiple times, either to hang out or to go do stuff, and I'm always told, "I'm sorry, I'm busy." And this is after literally days of waiting for a reply. Even when he's not busy sitting at home gaming, I still get the same response. With all these clear examples of him not wanting to befriend me, my girlfriend still insists that I give it time, and maybe he will eventually be friends with me. I really don't know what to do at this point, because I can see that it isn't going to work with John in the slightest, but my girlfriend for some reason refuses to see this and insists that we keep trying. So as of today, we're basically not speaking to each other due to a group texting between all four of us, leading to a fallout in communication between John and I. In the conversation, John revealed his true thoughts about me, which I had a feeling was how he felt from the beginning, due to his lack of interest in befriending me. Even seeing this and knowing everything I've been telling my girlfriend about John being the reason that we aren't friends, my girlfriend still insists we give it time and then try to become friends again. But I don't think that will ever happen, due to us trying that for the past 2.5 years, and it still hasn't happened. I really don't know where to go from here, because I do care about my girlfriend, but it's like she's not willing to see things from my perspective, and it's got me questioning a lot of things about myself. And these are things that I don't even think are issues, but my girlfriend seems to believe they are. What should I do? It honestly blows my mind that your girlfriend is still trying to make you have some kind of relationship with John. John sounds incredibly toxic. He clearly does not like you, and it sounds like you've literally done everything you can to try and develop some kind of relationship with him. So the way he's acting is completely inappropriate. He also backstabbed you and told all this information about you behind your back, even though you thought you could trust him and confide in him. And honestly, in my opinion, if I was in your shoes, the second John would have done that to me, that would have been the last attempt I would have made to try and be friends with him, regardless of what my girlfriend says. Of course, I'll be cordial and I'll try to be nice and all that stuff, but we will not be anything more than that. There's just no way. So maybe I think you really need to get it through to your girlfriend that John is not a good person that you want to be around. He has clearly done you wrong in the past, and it seems like he's actively trying to push you aside and treat you like garbage, and you do not deserve that in the slightest. If your girlfriend wants to hang out with her sister, go ahead and do that. But otherwise, I just don't see why you should be forced to come along and be best friends with this absolute jerk of a person. I found my husband searching for hidden cameras for the home, and now I'm really not sure what to do, and I'm really freaked out. Here's what happened. So my husband and I have been married for 2 years and together for 4 overall. The relationship has been solid, except for some communication issues, and what sometimes feels like a guilty until proven innocent type of viewpoint that he has towards me. There is no history of cheating, lying, or anything on my end. He is just generally very distrustful of people because he thinks that most humans generally have selfish motives. We were recently driving around to furniture stores, and he asked me to use his phone, which was hooked up to the GPS navigation, to put in the directions for a place that we found but couldn't remember the name of. The store page wasn't on any of his browser tabs, so I went to the browser history, knowing that we had Googled it a few days before. I should mention that neither of us are protective of our phones, and have always been comfortable using each other's for stuff like this, especially while driving. As I was scrolling down, I noticed that he had a cluster of searches for things like small hidden camera for home, or hidden camera for inside of house, and similar search terms. Now, I didn't want to make a thing of it while we were driving, so I just didn't say anything, but intended to ask about it later. Then, the more I thought about it, the more I got an awful feeling, and I still haven't said anything. We've never talked about getting cameras for the inside of our home. He does worry about intruders a lot, but it seems like an alarm system or a Ring doorbell would make much more sense for that kind of thing. There were a couple of times he acted suspicious about me having people in the house while he was gone, despite the fact that I didn't have anybody over. All we had were a few things go missing or even just get misplaced, and he jumped to the conclusion that I had had someone over while he was at work and they probably stole it. Really ridiculous stuff if you ask me. Now, I'm not sure if I should bring it up or act like I didn't see anything and see what he does, if anything. My fear is I don't want to become the suspicious one and make assumptions about why he was searching for that item when it could be something totally benign, like he was talking to someone at work about it and Googled for them. So I'm not sure whether to bring it up, and if so, how do I bring it up in a way where he doesn't have a chance to make up an excuse that it isn't true? Or should I just play dumb while keeping an eye out for anything weird around my home? I'm honestly so confused and I seriously don't know what to do. Yeah, that's really sketchy stuff, but honestly, if you're just now seeing that on his search history, then there's a good chance he probably already has one. Like seriously, some of those hidden cameras are really freaky. They are scary things that can be hidden just about anywhere in the home, and they keep getting more and more sophisticated over time. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe see if you can hire someone to take a look and see if they can use some kind of tools to find any hidden cameras, or even looking on like Amazon to see if there's anything that can help you with that. That way you can check for yourself and see if there's something going on that you really don't like. And I can't think of anybody who wants to be secretly spied on. Like there's no good reason for that. If you want to put up cameras, I think you have the right idea. Put up a Ring doorbell or something similar. So hopefully there's not a secret hidden camera inside your house, because that would be really creepy, and I don't know about you, but that would really set my nerves on fire, knowing that there could be a hidden camera somewhere in the house and I haven't noticed or spotted it yet. My boyfriend is upset with me because I am leaving for a month-long trip to Europe and he can't come along with me. And now he's implying that I'm only going to Europe so I can be away from him just to cheat on him. And I honestly don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I have been dating for about half a year. He is taking summer classes all summer, so he can't go anywhere. Meanwhile, I got invited to a trip to Europe with my friends. It's a guy friend and a girlfriend. I will be gone for a month, and my boyfriend can't come along, but is feeling super insecure about me leaving, especially with the other men that are going to be there. I already bought tickets and can't stop beating myself up about the fact that I'm leaving on a month-long trip without my partner, and it also really hurts to see that he's upset with me leaving. I would get extreme fear of missing out because I've never traveled anywhere without my parents. This is my first time, but I also love this guy, and I'm not sure if I'm being a bad girlfriend by leaving and choosing my own experiences. I assured him I would never be unfaithful and express my appreciation and love for him, but it doesn't seem to help. I'm worried that he will leave me over this, and I would hate to choose a trip over the relationship. The friend situation is what's making him the most upset. It is a couple and another dude, and he is worried that I'm getting set up on a double date and will be unfaithful to him, and it just doesn't sit right with him, despite me telling him how much I love him and would never cheat on him, and I don't ever have any intention to do so. I'm honestly so hurt and I'm so confused and I don't know what to do. Your boyfriend is being absolutely unreasonable. You're going on a trip to Europe. You're not going on the trip to Europe to cheat on him. He is literally only upset about this because he can't go with you, and so he's now projecting his own insecurities onto you that are, by the way, completely baseless claims that he's making against you for something that you haven't done and that you won't do. You've also only been dating this guy for half a year. Are you really gonna let a boyfriend that you've only been dating for 6 months tell you not to take a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity trip over to Europe with some friends? Like seriously, this is an easy one. And in my opinion, you would be a complete fool to not go to Europe. And you know what? If he breaks up with you, even though you know for a fact you wouldn't and won't do anything on this trip, then seriously, good riddance. Because trust, especially in the face of something like this, is so important for everybody involved. So honestly, I would go on this trip and not worry about what your partner's saying in the slightest. I know you love him and you've definitely expressed that, but just know that there's no actual problem with you going to Europe with some friends. And if anyone has a problem with it, it's your boyfriend and his weird baseless claims. My entitled roommate makes me pay for Wi-Fi that I'm not even actively using, after she gave me the wrong Wi-Fi information, which was actually the information for the guy across the hallway. And when I confronted my roommate about it, she feigned ignorance and dismissed it as quickly as I brought it up, and I've never been more offended in my life. Here's what happened. So first off, I want to say that this was a few years ago. I met my roommate on Facebook. We'll call her Brandy. That's not her real name. And I met her on the Facebook Marketplace section, which honestly was my first mistake. I was struggling to find a place and found this place that was close to my work and within my price range. Brandy had lived in the apartment for a couple of years already and was looking for someone to split the cost of the rent since it had gone up. We seemed to hit it off initially, and after seeing the apartment in person, I agreed to co-lease it with her and split the cost of the utilities. I'm going to be honest, I was 90% sure that this would be fine, but that remaining 10% was the part of me saying that it's fine now, but something is slightly off with her, and I really should have listened to that 10%. Let me paint you a brief picture of Brandy. She came from a lower upper class family, so she was relatively well off. She was somewhat down to earth, but sometimes her ignorance and entitlement really show through very clearly. One example of her ignorance was when she once commented on the water in her boyfriend's apartment and how it always seemed to get hotter faster than the hot water in our apartment. For context, her boyfriend was on the first floor and we were on the third floor of the building. I kind of shrugged it off until she proceeded to say that it was because it took hot water longer to travel up to our apartment. I immediately did a double take and asked her to clarify. Did she mean that it traveled from the lower floor in our building to our floor? But she said no. She then said, it goes from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill where our apartment was. I tried to explain to her that that's not how hot water works in the slightest, but she kept insisting that it was, so I just dropped it. Once Brandy had made up her mind that she was right, there was absolutely no changing it, no matter how much information you presented. Another time, her boyfriend got her a very lovely arrangement of red, pink, and purple roses for Valentine's Day. Now, if you've ever ordered flowers, especially for Valentine's Day, you'll know that they can get very expensive. And this was a full bouquet, so it must have been easily up to $150. I came home and commented on how beautiful they were and how sweet it was that he got her flowers. She scoffed and said, yeah, but they look like standard cheap arrangements. You could get these anywhere. I'm making him buy me new ones. And when she said that, I was so shocked. All I could really say was, oh, and I just walked over to my room. Now, when I moved in, Brandy said that she would pay the bills for utilities since they were already in her name and just asked that I would Venmo my half to her. She would send me an itemized breakdown every month in the form of a funds request in Venmo, and I would just pay her my half. I guess in hindsight, it was a really naive thing to do, but I agreed. So one day I came home from work when she was getting the internet set up at the apartment. When I moved in, I asked for the password to the Wi-Fi, and she sent me a screenshot of the router with a long generated password, then mentioned she was getting it set up for later that week. I thought that was odd, but I thought maybe she was setting up a specific Wi-Fi just for her work. So when the technician gave her the password, I, of course, asked for it. She froze for a moment, like she was contemplating if she should. Then I said, or am I supposed to just use the original one you gave me? Like, is this one separate? She quickly said, yes, just keep using that one. I didn't think anything of it and I just agreed. For the next 4 months, I continued to pay for my half of the Wi-Fi without another thought. I did think it was strange that sometimes I would plug my Amazon Fire TV into the TV in the living room and it would buffer a lot. But when she would use her Apple TV, the connection was always smooth. I didn't get an answer until one day when my boyfriend, who we'll call Mark, was over at the house. Mark is not his real name. We were hanging out in the living room when my roommate wasn't home and wanted to connect his Nintendo Switch to the Wi-Fi. I gave him the password and he immediately pointed out that the signal wasn't very strong. He asked where the router was and I showed him the one that she had set up. He told me it wasn't the same router since the picture of the password Brandy had given me was of a Verizon router and the one in the apartment was a Charter router. We looked for the Verizon one but couldn't find it in the apartment. So Mark followed the signal on his Switch until he had full bars. We quickly realized that he had a full signal when he was standing in front of our neighbor's door across the hall from us. I then texted my roommate, pretending that I had lost the screenshot of the Wi-Fi password that she had sent me months ago and asked her if she could send it to me again. Instead, she sent me the login and router details of the Charter Wi-Fi in our apartment. So it was confirmed. She had been charging me for Wi-Fi for 4 months and I have been stealing Wi-Fi from our neighbors across the hall. Eventually, I confronted Brandy about it and she feigned ignorance, saying that she didn't remember telling me not to use the Wi-Fi in our apartment, even though I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that she had. When I told her that it wasn't fair for me or the guy across the hallway that she has done this, she retorted by saying, it's fine. The guy across the way owes me money for something, so it works out. But I pointed out that any money issues between her and the guy across the hallway had nothing to do with me, and that she had lied and stolen $150 $140 from me over the course of the past several months. She insisted that she did nothing wrong and that she didn't owe me anything. I was afraid that she would try to kick me out, although I wasn't aware at the time that I couldn't be kicked out because I co-signed the lease. I had been homeless for a year prior, struggling to find an apartment in a safe neighborhood that I could afford due to my low-paying job. This was the first place that was both in my budget and in a safe neighborhood, and at the time, I couldn't move in with my boyfriend because he didn't make much at the time and lived in a shoebox-sized studio apartment, so I just let it go, and I didn't say anything about it for nearly a year. I thankfully ended up getting it back when I moved out because, much to no one's surprise, we had a huge fight, which then caused me to later move out of the apartment. So overall, I'm really glad that I don't live with Brandy anymore. Brandy in this story sounds like a piece of work. I mean, how absolutely dishonest can you be? She not only lied to you about having to pay for that Wi-Fi, but she also gave you the Wi-Fi information to the guy across the hallway. Like, seriously, that's messed up. And that's not okay in the slightest. But thankfully, it looks like you did get your money back in the end, and you were able to move out of that apartment. And I don't blame you for getting out of there when you could, because your roommate sounded super shady. And in my opinion, it probably would have been only a matter of time until she tries some other sketchy stuff on you. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked down below in the description. My wife and my parents don't get along, and I'm tired of dancing around the issue after so many years, and I seriously don't know what to do. For basically the entirety of our time together, which is 5 years being married and 9 years being together overall, my wife has disliked my parents. My wife is very sensitive and can take things very personally and blow things out of proportion. My parents, who are definitely not without blame in this, can be a bit hard to deal with. My mom is, to be honest, a bit of a narcissist. She's the kind of person that just isn't super warm and can say things without a filter and kind of makes things all about herself. To be honest, it's something I've been aware of, but until I met my wife, I never realized what a problem it was. I think that over time, I've just kind of dealt with it and just wrote off her behavior as that's just mom being mom. But with my wife being so sensitive, I've gotten better at calling my mom out for her behavior, though I admit I don't do it as much as I should. Some other important facts that will be relevant later on is that my wife and I live about 7 hours away from my parents. I have 2 brothers, and both of them live 4 hours from our parents, but in different cities. My wife's parents live about 20 minutes away from us, and we see them often. My wife has high anxiety around seeing my parents, and honestly, it's mostly my mom. She and my wife are just like oil and water, just like in the way I touched on earlier. Part of the reason is that my mom has a history of saying some very unkind things to her, and I admittedly wasn't great about standing up for her in the past. It's something I've gotten a lot better at, but there's still some anxiety on my wife's part. I would bring up the topic of my parents visiting us or even us visiting them once every 3 or 4 months or so, and usually it would start a big fight. I'd say about half the time, my wife would agree to see them. We kind of came to an agreement when my wife said that she wanted to only see them a few times a year, and I agreed, mostly for the sake of keeping the peace, but we'd still get into arguments when I brought up trying to see them. My wife and I have talked about putting up boundaries with my parents, which I am still working on, and I think I'm doing an okay job at it. Our daughter was born 2.5 years ago. I had always assumed, perhaps hopefully, that my parents would change their ways when they became grandparents. I had great relationships with my grandparents on both sides, and was hoping that our daughter would have the same with my parents. However, it hasn't quite been like that. While they haven't been unkind, they're not the kind of grandparents I was hoping they would be. For example, they rarely ask about our daughter unprompted. When we FaceTime them, they'll talk with our daughter for a few minutes, then go off to talk about their own thing. It always feels like they want to be grandparents, but on terms that work for them. I also think it hasn't helped that my wife's parents, who see our daughter often, are the complete polar opposite of my parents. They're your typical lovey-dovey grandparents. In the first year of our daughter's life, my wife had a tough time with postpartum depression. As such, I didn't really push the topic of my parents visiting with her on them. Fortunately though, due to COVID, I was able to kind of push off their request to visit us. But once COVID kind of let up in the spring of 2021, they came down to visit a few times, and it was okay. My parents didn't really interact with our daughter like we had hoped. They played with her a little bit, but they just seemed interested in working on their laptops and playing on their phones. My wife and I were both upset as to how that trip went. A few weeks after that, we went to visit them at their house, but we had to leave early because our daughter got sick. When we left, my parents seemed upset with us and kept saying things like, "Oh, she's not sick, she can stay, it's fine," which really bothered my wife and I. Things then were okay for a few months. We saw my parents a few times, but it was mostly at big events, like weddings, anniversaries, or parties, stuff like that. So they didn't have much one-on-one interaction with our daughter. The last time they saw our daughter in person was for her birthday party. It felt like my parents didn't even spend as much time with our daughter as they did with our niece. While I was a little bit hurt by it, but didn't say anything to keep the peace, my wife was completely distraught. Since then, things between my parents and my wife haven't been great. They've been acting the same. They'll ask us about her intermittently and do the same thing when they're on FaceTime. They've asked me a few times about coming home to visit, but when I bring it up to my wife, her response is, no, I don't think they've earned the right to visit. My wife is of the mindset that having a relationship with your grandkids is something that's earned, not given. While I agree to an extent, and I don't think that my parents have earned a free pass on everything, I do think that we could stand to foster a bit more of a relationship with them, but my wife won't have it. Things have come to a head when my parents have been trying to plan a week-long vacation with us, and this would include my brothers and their spouses. For some context, my wife and I go to the beach for a week with her family, as do my brothers with their respective in-laws. My parents wanted to also book a vacation house with us, partly because they want to spend time with us, but also because I think they're just jealous. When I brought it up with my wife, it started a minor fight that we ended up compromising, that we wouldn't go for the whole week because she didn't want to spend that much time around my parents, but rather we would just go for about 4 days. I was worried about the optics of how that would look to my parents, but fortunately, neither of my brothers and their families could stay for the whole week either. I texted my parents to let them know that we'd only be there for 4 days, and everything absolutely hit the fan. I received a text from my mom saying how sad and frustrated they are at how they haven't built the relationship with our daughter that they want to, and that they were hoping to spend the entire week with her. She also added that they keep wanting to come see us, but I keep pushing them away. My mom then went on to say how she never had a relationship with her grandmother, and that she would be sick if our daughter had the same relationship. She then went on to say how all 3 of her sons had great relationship with our grandparents, and that we, meaning my parents, never stood in the way of those relationships. Anyways, with all things considered, I'm just at my wit's end with this. I can't exactly say, well, mom, a big reason why I keep dodging your visits is because my wife hates you and your visits cause massive anxiety. I feel like I've been able to put up this charade to them that everything is fine, but this feels like a house of cards that's about to fall over. Honestly, I just want everyone to get along, and I hate that both my mom and my wife are upset at me, but both sides just keep digging their heels further into the ground, and I'm not sure how to keep the peace, and I seriously don't know what to do. Honestly, it doesn't sound like your wife is sensitive, but in reality, I kind of feel like your mom is just a jerk. And sure, maybe it feels like you're making a choice between your wife and your mom, but in reality, this is not a choice. You need to pick your wife first, to be completely honest with you. You put up with your mom's behavior because you were a kid, and you didn't know any better and you didn't know how to cope. But now you're an adult, and you made a promise to your wife that you would be with her and that you would choose her first. And from what I'm reading, it really seems like you're putting a lot of the blame on your wife in the first place. You're pushing it aside as if she's being sensitive, when in reality, she's probably being reasonable, and you just have been gaslit so much that you don't see how toxic your mom really is. And maybe this is a hard thing for you to come to grips with, which honestly would not be surprising. It is your mom after all, so you feel the need to keep the peace because that's what you've done your entire life. And let's face the facts, your wife doesn't want them visiting because she knows she can't rely on you to handle your parents. You literally don't have her back. In fact, your post really kind of leans on the fact that your wife is the center of blame, and that her refusal to spend time around these people who mistreat her is somehow unreasonable. And instead of being honest with your parents and telling them exactly how it is, you're literally shifting the blame over to your wife. And that really seems like the perspective that you're coming from when it comes to this post. Because at the end of the day, your wife is looking out for herself and her daughter, because clearly it doesn't look like you are. And that's not fair in the slightest. And I really don't think you're the middleman either, because honestly, it seems like your wife is the front man, and you're just standing behind it and saying, oh, there's nothing I could do about it. So in my opinion, I think you need to set some serious boundaries while also apologizing to your wife, because she's put up with this for quite a while now, and it seriously should not have gotten this bad in the first place. My mom would try to make me promise as a child that I would take care of her and give her money when I become an adult, and I'm just now reflecting on it, and it seriously freaks me out. So this is a random memory that popped up in my head today, but this feels so messed up now that I'm thinking about it. Ever since I was a little kid, my mom would ask me weird, off-the-wall questions, as well as make me promises to her. It ranged from her asking, am I a good mom? All the way up to, are you gonna take care of me as an adult rather than put me in a nursing home? Promise you'll take care of me? And I never thought these were weird until she kept asking me even as a teenager. teenager. But what really gets me is how she would make me promise to give her part of my REZ check once I hit 18. She would do so in a way that would seem so innocent, but incredibly binding, as if she fully expected to remind me about it if I never paid her. For those of you who don't know, an REZ check is money given to people who descend from Native American tribes and have rights to the reservations. My dad is part of such a tribe and has been receiving a couple $1,000s every month since he was about 18 years old, and I was set to start collecting these checks myself once I turned 18 as well. Sadly, due to a bunch of political garbage between the Native councils and the American government, my blood was considered too diluted to receive these checks. But I mean, oh well, I can't miss what I never had. But this made my mom really upset though. Eventually though, it hit me as an adult that my mom was trying to get me to promise her that I would give her half of it growing up. It was a frequent conversation where she would be like, "You promised to take care of mommy. Are you really going to let me have a portion of your money?" And she would do this for as long as I can remember. Honestly, it really ticks me off thinking about it. How did she not see how weird and toxic that behavior was? I don't know. Maybe she was just super insecure, and due to her disability, she was looking for a way to get paid since she felt she couldn't work anymore or something like that. Luckily, now she's overcome those insecurities and learned to live independently with her disability, even getting a job where she makes a decent amount of money that she doesn't know what to do with. She sends me and my family money for special occasions and doesn't ask me any of these weird questions anymore, not even about living with me now that I have a house and a family of my own. Still though, I have to wonder what went through her head when she would try and make a child promise that they would pay her once she became of age. It's honestly weird, and I'm so glad that I don't have to do that. Your mom was seriously being super sketchy. I mean, that's crazy. You don't do that to a child, let alone a 6-year-old who doesn't know any better. So I think you're on the right track. You can't miss what you never had. So it really is a good thing that you never had to give any money to her in the first place. And it's also nice that she found a job of her own that pays really well. That way she can have some semblance of freedom and independence while also respecting you and your money. My mom gets very upset that I'm independent now and that I now don't always have to take her advice. But as a result of me setting some boundaries, she's gotten upset and decided to take it all out on me all of the sudden. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So for context, I'm 23 years old and my mom is 54. I am the only child of my parents and have been close with both of them. I graduated college in May of 2022 and started dating my boyfriend a month prior in April of 2022. I've been thankfully working as a teacher since August of 2022, and I have become very independent, from making my own money to living with my boyfriend. And you know what? I feel like this upsets and angers my mom, and I feel like she wants to control me even though I am a responsible adult. Since October, I have had a plethora of medical issues that haven't been resolved, and this is even after a general surgeon's intervention a few times. I asked the surgeons back in November if seeing a specialist would have been beneficial, but they did not think so at the time, so I just followed their orders. The whole time, my mom was very opinionated about the whole thing and has always lacked trust in doctors for whatever reason. She was upset and still reminds me to this day that I should have advocated for myself more and seen the specialist. She constantly makes me feel bad about it and how I prolonged any healing. I explained that I obviously can't go back in time and I have to make the best of the situation now, but it's never a sufficient answer. Another thing with her is her drinking. My boyfriend and I are clearly of legal drinking age, and we like to enjoy a drink or two with our meals. Neither of us nor any family members have struggled with alcohol or made any poor decisions regarding drinking. She constantly grills me about it though. She simply doesn't see the need for us to drink as often as we do, and has even said the same to my half-brother and his wife. She tries to say that my drinking is impeding me from healing from all my medical issues, despite getting a green light from the doctor. Today, I explained to her how she doesn't have to understand or support every decision I make, and back in January, I asked her to please only give advice if and when I ask for it. If I don't take it, she gets frustrated. She gets passive-aggressive and says that no one cares, or she puts herself down by claiming, "I know, I'm just the jerk of the family." She even started crying because my grandparents and brother don't always take her advice, and this is advice that she gives out without anyone asking for it, and she decided that now was a good time to take that out on me as well. She even told me today that she is going to give advice and her opinion regardless of what anybody else thinks, because she's my mother and she can. And she also tried to make it seem like I said they have not supported me whatsoever, which isn't true. Once I stood up for myself and I told her that I don't owe them an explanation for for my decisions and assured them that I am responsible, she just straight up hung up on me. I'm at a loss right now. I'm sure she thinks that because I'm 23, have a job, and have a boyfriend who's older than me, that I think I know it all somehow. But I'm honestly tired of all of this. Has anyone ever had an experience similar to this? What should I do? The way your mom is acting is ridiculous. You really are an adult, and you can make decisions for yourself. And it sounds like your mom is just upset because now you can make your own decisions, and she literally plays no role in that in the slightest. And that's seriously not your fault. That is literally and completely only on your mother. But you know what? You've made your wishes known. You've drawn a line in the sand, and you've decided, hey, this is my boundary, and I don't want you to cross it anymore. It's not like you're saying, oh, I don't want you in my life anymore, because your mom is certainly trying to twist it in that way, and she's trying to make it seem like you just don't want her around anymore, which is completely inaccurate, and I seriously would not entertain that for a second. So hopefully your mother can come around and see some kind of reason, because the way she's acting is ridiculous, and you really didn't do anything wrong by setting up some personal boundaries. An entitled Karen tries to excuse her son, who blatantly stole my merchandise off of my display, and when I finally demand to have my merchandise back, this entitled Karen refuses to pay, claiming that he deserves to have it for free anyways. Here's what happened. So I'm 22 years old, and I'm finishing out my last semester of college, and decided to sell some key rings and vinyl stickers I made at my school spring market. I laser cut these keychains and put slogans, royalty-free icons, and some of my own personal designs on them. The keychains are pretty reasonably priced, $5 to $8 depending on the complexity of the design, and usually these things sell like hotcakes at the market. I'm a big Minecraft fan, so I make a lot of creeper keychains, which are pretty popular with a younger demographic. I was at my stall at the market, and I was finishing up a few transactions with a customer when a boy, probably aged 10 to 13, snags one of my more detailed, larger Minecraft keychains off of my display. I call after him and I tell him that he needs to pay for the keychain. He continues to run away, and so I flag over the market coordinator, John, to report the kid for thievery. Eventually, John finds the kid and tells him he needs to pay for the keychain. The kid, followed by his entitled Karen of a mother, makes their way over to my stall. I tell the entitled Karen that her kid stole the keychain, and either he needs to pay for it or it needs to be returned. The entitled Karen immediately starts going off about how ridiculous and how embarrassing this whole ordeal is. You screamed at my son, but you also sent security after him, embarrassing him in front of the whole market. This entitled Karen then claims that her son is going through therapy because he has onset social anxiety disorder, as well as onset agoraphobia. She proceeds to look down at my shoes and sees that I have creepers on my Crocs, and says that I could relate to the love of video games and try and cut her son some slack because that's the honorable thing to do for a child in need, whatever that means. I told her that I would be happy to give him a discount, but I could not afford to give these away for free, as I used the profits to pay for my college tuition. I also told her that I sympathize with her son, but social anxiety is not an excuse to be a thief. Now, apparently this was the wrong thing to say, because this set this entitled Karen off in a horrible way that caused a massive disruption in the entire venue. She then started screaming at me, shouting that her son was not a thief, and at this point she was scaring customers away, and people were literally actively walking away from the booths that were near mine to avoid this conflict. I tried to keep a level head, and at this point her son looked like he wanted to shrivel up and just melt. I felt really bad for the kid. I mean, no wonder he has social anxiety. He has a mom who's willing to make a scene like this over something so small. The kid even tried to give me $8 to just pay for the keychain and get it over with, but the mom took it out of his hand and shoved it in her pocket. Eventually, John came and asked her to step away from the booth as she was disturbing customers. The entitled Karen and her kid ended up leaving, but the kid did pay for his keychain. I even threw in a free sticker to apologize for him having a mother like that. Overall, I ended up selling out of my stock and had an eventful rest of the market. Some onlookers even remarked that I handled the situation pretty well. Needless to say though, I will probably be switching to online sales for the foreseeable future. That is honestly ridiculous. First and foremost, that kid should not have stolen from that table, and he is seriously lucky that he didn't get arrested. I don't know if anyone out there has been to markets or like convention centers where they have like an artist alley alleyway, but some of those places that I've been to are really tightly run. Like if you get caught stealing and make it out of the venue, you could get arrested. Like it really is serious. Plus, a lot of these artists and the people who make the merchandise really do make a living off of those things that they sell. Like they use that to pay for bills and to buy food and get medicine, like seriously important stuff. So yeah, it was just an $8 keychain, but you know what? That's $8 out of the original poster's pocket. But if you really do look at it, the kid's only like what, 10 to 13 years old? I think any reasonable person would be at least forgiving and say, hey, you can keep it, but you have to pay for it. Otherwise, give it back. This is not a charity and you can't just give it away for free. That's not how this works. So with that in mind, the way the mom was acting is seriously crazy. Like to get up in your face about her son stealing and making a fool of herself and making everybody else around her uncomfortable, all of that is just completely inappropriate. And I think the original poster has it right. No wonder the kid has anxiety, especially if his Karen of a mother's gonna act like that when he's the one that messed up and tried to steal something. So honestly, good for the original poster for sticking to their values and for not caving into this weird lady, because entitled Karens who act like this really do need to be put in their place, especially if they're gonna act crazy and start shouting like a maniac. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for hiding my late mother's earrings from my father after knowing that he would try to pawn them off for some money? So when I was young, my family wasn't rich. Sometimes we were getting by, and other times we were borrowing money left and right. My mom had some jewelry that they sometimes pawned off, but they always got it back. All this changed when my father went to work abroad and started making good money. We lived comfortably for about a year, and then my mom started having health problems. For the next few years, the majority of what my dad was sending us went into my mom's treatments, and unfortunately, she did eventually pass away. And even worse, my dad could not come home for the funeral because of his contract. My grandmother took my mom's gold earrings that she wore every day and started wearing them herself to have something to remind herself of her daughter. After a few more years, my dad came back home permanently. He decided to use some of the money he made to buy and renovate the place we were living in, as by that point we were renting. However, he seriously underestimated the renovation costs, and he ended up spending almost everything he had. So financially, we were back where we started. A few months later, my grandmother also passed away. The neighbor who found her told me she took her earrings and put them in a safe place in the house. I checked later on and they were there, and so I took them with me. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, and I was visiting my dad, and I was about to leave when I spotted something in his jacket pocket. It was a piece of paper with the word pawn written on it. I took it and I read it. It was a receipt from the pawn shop where the object pawned was described as a woman's gold ring. He started pawning her jewelry again. While I was a bit furious that he did this without telling me, I understood that he needed the money. So to try and keep the peace, I pretended that I never saw the receipt in the first place. I'm now in college by this point, and I have free student housing because I'm technically now an orphan. Because of the same reason, the state pays me a certain amount of money monthly as long as I'm in school. It's not much by any stretch of the imagination, but I do get by. A few days ago, my father suddenly asked me if I had any idea what happened to my mom's gold earrings. My grandmother wore a bandana on her head, which is very common for old women of our country that we live in, and it must have covered her ears. And I guess neither me or my grandmother told him that she took the earrings, so he technically doesn't know where they are. Knowing what he did with a ring, I honestly did not want him to pawn the earrings too, so I answered him by saying that I have no idea what came of them. He asked me some more questions, but my answers were the same. Now, I know that he needs the money, but I simply don't know if he'll get them back like last time, so I didn't want to take the risk. As far as he knows, my mom was buried with them. But now, with all things considered, I'm starting to feel bad about taking my mother's earrings and not telling him about it. So am I the jerk for hiding these earrings from my father, all because I didn't want him to pawn them off at a store? Should I have told him about these earrings in the first place? What should I do? First and foremost, I want to say you are not the jerk in this situation. The fact that you want to hold on to these earrings and keep them as a family heirloom of sort, even if it's just so you can remember your mother by, is, in my opinion, a really good thing. Like, this clearly could go to one of your kids in the future, and I really don't think it should be pawned off by your father, even if there is some slight chance that he could get it back. Like, that's not okay in my opinion. The original poster went on to say that they're a guy and they don't wear jewelry like that, so they have no intentions of ever wearing it. And you know what? That's okay. That's probably going to be better for you in the long run, because because wearing them often could make you forget that you have them on, and then eventually your dad could see them. So it's honestly a good thing that you don't wear them, in my opinion. That way you can keep them in a safe place while also not worrying about having to take them off if you just so happen to be around your dad. So no, you're not the jerk in this situation. You're just trying to preserve a memory of your mother that your father clearly is not taking seriously, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that in the slightest. My coworker, who is clearly in a relationship, confessed to me that he really likes me, even though he knows that I am also in a relationship, and now I seriously don't know what to do. So I started working at this job about a month ago, and after meeting some friends here, it made work genuinely a lot of fun. A group of 2 girls and 3 guys, all in our early 20s. I went out with them yesterday and it was great. I even told them some personal things, and now I really do love that group. Then afterwards, one of the guys called me and confessed he was into me. Now that isn't a bad thing, except for the fact that he has a girlfriend and apparently lied to her about what group he went out with. I feel so sorry for the girl, and I will pressure him to tell her because she doesn't deserve this stuff, and she deserves a better boyfriend. It is also weird because I've had literally like 5 conversations with this guy in total, so I don't understand why he felt the need to confess to me that he likes me. And to make matters worse, I also have a boyfriend, and he knows that. I even told my new friends how much my boyfriend means to me and how he has helped me out of my depression. I just don't understand why he would do this to his girlfriend and put me in that position too, especially after what I told them about my boyfriend. Like seriously, what do you expect me to say? I'm disappointed, and it is a pattern. This is not the first time this has happened. Almost every guy friend I make hits on me after a month or so. I know so many guys that are great, and I want to be friends with them. It just seems to happen every single time, even when I think it won't. It makes me feel like I'll never be a person to a guy, that I'm not a person and I'm just a girl. I'm either something that they physically want to look at, if you know what I mean, or they're just romantically interested in me, or they find me uninteresting at all, and I honestly hate it. I just want to get to know people and talk to them without other intentions. I stopped making one-on-one guy friends because they seem to take it the wrong way when I'm friendly with them, and I don't want to lead someone on or be mean. But I thought making friends in a group would be just a little bit different. So because of this, I lost another friend group. I'm young, and I don't know how to handle this correctly. I can't just keep hanging out with this group now. I feel like that won't be right to my partner, but I really want to be friends with the others. I had such a great time, but that means I'll have to be around that guy too, and I just don't want to. I told the other girl in the group about this, mostly to warn her in case he is suddenly in love with her too, while also not telling the other guys about this situation. Before this all happened, he invited all of us to do something together next weekend, but after I rejected him, I got uninvited. Is this a sign that I should withdraw from the whole group in general, or is there a way I can keep being friends with everyone else? I don't want to lose this friend group either, even though it is clearly him that is messing up. What should I do? This is an awful situation, because here you are at a new job and you just want to make friends with people so you can make your working experience just a little bit more bearable. And trust me, I totally get that. Especially when you work in customer service, there are some people that you deal with that absolutely just suck. So having some kind of partner in crime, or even just a colleague that you're friendly with to help you get through the day, really does make a huge difference when you're just trying to get it done. But now you have a guy that's not only going behind his girlfriend's back, but also completely ignoring the fact that you have a boyfriend. Also, he can be like, I really like you. Like, that's so inappropriate. It's so messed up. And it really sucks that this came your way. And you can see what his intentions really were. He wanted to get with you, and he clearly wanted to try and cheat on his girlfriend. And when you said no and rejected him, he has officially uninvited you out of their group. And that's not fair in the slightest. So maybe a possible solution in the future is that maybe you could bring your boyfriend with you the next time you hang out with anyone from work. That way, you can very clearly project to everybody around you that yes, you have a boyfriend. Here he is in person. And no, I'm not interested in you. But at the end of the day, it's pretty clear that this guy's gonna try and have some kind of role in making it so you're not invited to these events or any of these get-togethers in general. And that's honestly really unfair and super unfortunate. I think it would also be valuable to try and find friends outside of work. That might be a really nice solution to this problem where all of your friends are colleagues that you work with. That way you can have some people outside of the job who can understand where you're coming from, who won't also try to hit on you. But to answer your question, I don't think you should withdraw from the group. If he wants to play the game of, oh, you're not invited because you rejected me, well then you can do the exact same thing. You should absolutely invite people to stuff that you want to do, even if that that means that guy's not going to be there. There is absolutely no reason you should withdraw from people that you clearly have some kind of connection with. And just because you rejected this guy does not mean that this guy gets to decide who you can and cannot be friends with. My neighbor is obsessed with me, and despite the fact that he has a girlfriend, he constantly texts me and tries to get in contact with me for us to spend some time together. And at this point, I don't know what to do. So I'm a 30-year-old female, and I know that at my age, I should be better and stronger. But you know what? I'm not. I experienced a lot of really sketchy stuff in the past, and we're talking from the young age of just being a late teenager, which has made me perpetually afraid of standing up to people. I'm in therapy for it, and I've made a lot of progress. But this guy surfed right over all my blind spots, and I basically don't know how to get rid of him. I know, it's pathetic. There are probably 18-year-olds who have dealt with this in a more mature and efficient way, but here we are. Anyways, I live in an apartment building in a big city. One day, I arrived home at the same time as my neighbor from our respective jobs. He chatted me up, we rode the elevator together, I got out on my floor and he on his. It was a short conversation and it honestly wasn't anything weird. A day later, he sends me a text message, and the weirdest thing is, I had not given him my phone number. In fact, he grabbed it from the neighbors group chat. He told me I was pretty and that he liked our conversation, and so on and so on. I told him that if this is his way of asking me out, I was not interested. He somehow managed to convince me that we should just be friends, and I figured that this would eventually just go away and that would be that. He asked me about innocent stuff, hobbies that I had, or stuff along those lines. We both read a lot of books and we play games, so we had some pleasant conversations there. Sometimes he would test the waters by giving me a compliment that was focused on my looks, and I always immediately shut that down. He also asked me to meet up with him, which I completely deflected. Fast forward a few months, and I find out by accident he has a girlfriend who is living with him. Another neighbor mentioned her in the neighbor chat, which she isn't a part of. I asked him if she knew about our conversations and said that they were in an open relationship. He even asked for relationship advice, which I cut off since I wasn't comfortable talking about her behind her back. He also seems to be perpetually online, sending me messages every single day, but after a while, I turned off my online statuses because he would continuously point out that I had read his messages and not replied yet, or when I was last online. I told him multiple times, I only pick up my phone a few times a week, but it hasn't deterred him. Why haven't I blocked him? Well, for one, he's a big tall guy who knows which floor I live on. My second reason is when he got wind that my dad passed away unexpectedly from cancer, he was super nice and supportive. He said all the right things. He asked me how I was doing long after the funeral, and I figured maybe we could actually be friends. Fast forward a few more months, and he's getting pushy again. He wants to meet up. He wants to have phone calls. He makes frequent contact with me, and if he was any kind of friend, I would be okay with that. But if I'm honest with myself, I don't really trust that he was telling the truth about his girlfriend, and this constant nagging is starting to get to me. I want to end whatever this is for good. I notice now that I am instinctively avoiding arriving home at the same time that he does. I don't participate in the neighborhood chat anymore because putting a message in there sends him the bat signal about me being online. I know it's cowardly, but I really don't know how to end this at this point, and I don't know what to do. Honestly, this is a fantastic situation where you really need to be rude to this guy. It sounds like you're being way too nice to him, and he's picking up clues that you're not dropping. So maybe just be rude to him. Tell him to get lost and say, no, I'm not interested. You're freaking me out and you're being weird. And then block him and go from there. Like, you do not need to be afraid of this guy just because he's tall, and also because he was kind of friendly to you when your father passed away. That is not some kind of unique trait that people have. That's the bare minimum that someone can do to someone who's grieving that they might even know about in the slightest. So cut this guy off. You don't even need to give him any kind of explanation. You could literally just block his number now and be done with it. And if he really does approach you, just say straight up, I'm not interested and I really don't want to be friends. And that's that. He might come back and say that you're rude or condescending or whatever, but guess what? He's not going to bother you anymore now, is he? But hopefully this all works out for you, because there's no reason for you to feel like you can't even come home at a certain time without this guy pestering you nonstop. I really feel like I want to break up with my boyfriend, not because of anything that he did specifically, but so I can just focus on my career and my career alone. But he does not like that idea and is demanding that we stay together. And right now, I seriously don't know what to do. So I've been in this relationship for about a year and a half, and things are all right, but I think we're starting to look at different futures with each other that just don't align. I also don't know how to explain, but but I just don't want to be in a relationship anymore. I'm working on my career and myself, and I think he is very clingy, and that's just the last thing I want right now. I was okay with that before I started my career, but it's starting to be distracting for me. Now, I did mention splitting up, but he gets very upset with me because I can't give a good reason since the relationship is mostly good. He says that I can work and grow my career in a relationship and we can figure out our futures together. So he doesn't think that my reasoning is a valid excuse, I guess. He also says his reasoning for not wanting to break up is because we're perfect for each other and he doesn't think he'll find anyone after me. I mean, he thinks that we're meant for each other. I don't agree with that because we're only 20 years old and there's so many people out there still that I could meet. We have tried working things out, but it just goes back to where we started again. The fact that I really think that we should break up. What should I do? First and foremost, at least you know early on that you don't want to have a relationship right now. It would be one thing to try and make this work while also being absolutely miserable and knowing in your heart that, hey, this is not what I want. Because I think it's really cruel and really unkind to string someone along like that and to basically lead them into thinking that you have a future with them, when in reality, you very clearly know that you don't want to be with this person long term. You don't feel like you're soulmates, and you feel like your futures are definitely going in different directions, which is a really good thing to notice. You're basically saving both of you a lot of time. But when it comes to breaking up, I really don't think there's an easy formula for getting it done. You just have to be willing to be the bad guy, even if it's just for a minute, to just break up. I mean, breakups in and of themselves are unilateral. You don't need his consent. He doesn't need to see your reasons as valid, and it is not reasonable to expect someone to agree to be dumped. So if you really do want to break up with him, just tell him the truth, because it sounds like it's literally not about him. This is not something that he did or something that he may have said or anything like that. You just literally aren't feeling it anymore. And for once, the cliche actually rings true. It's not you, it's me. And then that's that. They might try to come back to you a little bit more to figure out what you can do, or if there's any kind of like stipulation or some kind of way where you both can make this work, but you honestly don't have to go against your word, and you shouldn't be forced to try and go into this relationship any further if you feel like you're basically wasting your time. So hopefully, if you do decide to break up with him, I hope it really does go well, because the situation is already really tough as it is, and I think things will start to click into place once you do make that decision and decide to move on. An entitled old man steals our belongings out from underneath us after we placed our items on a lounge chair at a resort that we were staying at. And despite our several attempts to try and retrieve our belongings, this entitled old man pretended like he didn't know what was going on, forcing us to get the resort manager involved just to find a solution. Here's what happened. So first I want to say that this happened during the month of April. Me and my family had gone to this resort near the beachside. Now the way that the resort worked was that it split into various buildings. There was building 1200, 1100, and 1000. And the rooms in building 1000 were much more luxurious and expensive, being larger and nearer to the sea, while the rooms in building 1200 were much more affordable, but smaller as well. My family booked a room somewhere around 1100, which wasn't too shabby. It had access to a small river-like pool leading to the main public pool. So one day we decided to go for a swim and made our way to the public pool. After a while of swimming, we decided to make our way back via the pool back to our room. So we brought our towels and accessories, like a super soaker and some goggles, and made our way slowly towards our room. Unfortunately though, midway through, I cut my leg on a decorative rock that they had in the pool, and my leg started to bleed and ache like crazy. So my mom decided to help bring me to our room, since I had difficulty doing so. She left our towels and other items on 2 beach chairs just at the edge of the pool, just so she wouldn't have to carry it at the same time as bringing me back to the room. My mom eventually made her way back to the spot that she had placed our items at, only to find our belongings dumped on the ground, and sitting on the chairs were our suspects. One of them was an older man, and the other was a teenager or young adult next to him. They were about 18 years old, and presumably they were this older man's son. So my mom decided to confront them, and as a result, an argument developed within seconds. My mom said, "Excuse me, why are you sitting here? And why have our belongings been dumped on the ground?" The old man chimes in and says, "They were taking up the seat. Please leave, this is private property." Now, it's really important to note that the chair nor the area it was taking up was private property in the slightest. There was a footpath behind them which broke off the path to lead to a room, which was presumably theirs, but the footpath itself was still for anyone to use, let alone the chairs. So my mom responded by saying, "This is not private property. Why did you dump our belongings belongings on the ground. But the old man wasn't having it. He just kept screaming, "This is private property. Leave." But my mom repeated herself again. She said, "This is not private property, and if you don't answer me, I will contact the hotel staff." The old man still continues to insist that this is private property, with their tone getting more aggressive as time went on. My mom decided it wasn't worth the effort to fight back, so she just snatched up our belongings and left for our room. When she came back, she hung up the towels and went to dry off our accessories. And that's when she realized that one of the goggles that we had bought was completely missing. So she decided to make her way back and recount her steps in hopes that she dropped them on the way unknowingly. Eventually, she made her way to the beach chairs where the old man was lying down with his son. My mom continued her search, and right when she showed up, this old man said again that this is private property and she needs to leave right away. My mom said, "I'm looking for something. Have you seen any goggles around here?" But the entitled old man was completely unhelpful, as he just repeated that he hasn't seen anything and that she needs to leave because this is private property. Now, another thing that's important to note is that the old man's son apparently seemed to hate him, looking away when he was spitting out the nonsense about private property, and just seemed incredibly embarrassed in general. My mom was irritated and decided to leave frustrated, coming to the conclusion that it would be easier to make a complaint to the resort staff. She made her way to the lobby and asked one of them to tell the old man that the seats he was claiming were his were in fact public property, and to also help find the lost goggles. The staff seemed very unconcerned, however, telling her that they would do it despite immediately going back to other tasks and paying her no mind. So she decided to speak to a manager who she actually knew for quite a while, since she would often have to discuss business dealings with them as a representative of her workplace. So the manager came out, and this was a tall individual, and my mom told him the story. So the resort manager followed my mom over to the seats and told the old man to stop insisting the property was his, since it clearly was not. The entitled old man, seeing that he had no chance of winning this, made his way back to his room, all while grumbling under his breath in anger. And while this guy was finally put in his place, my mom still had not found the goggles. However, when the entitled old man's son trailed behind his dad back to their room, my mom noticed he was carrying a small cloth bag that, among other things, had 2 pairs of goggles identical to ours. So she went up and knocked on the doors of their room, with the resort manager right behind her, with the entitled old man answering the door. My mom looks at this old man and says to him straight up, "Why do you have our goggles?" The old man said, "I don't know what you mean. I didn't take anything." But my mom says, "That bag," pointing at the cloth bag sitting on the bed behind him, "that bag has our goggles in it." The entitled old man said, "I don't know what you mean. Stop accusing me of stuff." Thankfully, the resort manager stepped in and said to this guy, "If you do not show us the bag, I will have to make a missing items report." The entitled old man grumbled a bit and hesitantly walked towards the bag. He left the door open wide enough for my mom and the resort manager to walk in. They surrounded the bag, and lo and behold, the goggles she was looking for were sitting comfortably at the top of the bag. My mom grabbed our goggles, her blood practically boiling at the attempted theft of her things. And these goggles, by the way, were not cheap. They were relatively pricey for goggles. The resort manager was frowning and was threatening to make a police report. The old man, of course, begged him not to, spewing some nonsense about finding it on the ground and taking it because nobody claimed it, which is still illegal, by the way, and also a horrible excuse. However, I think the resort manager didn't want to go through the hassle of submitting a police report, so he and my mom made their way out of the room. And with all things considered, it kind of hurts knowing that this entitled old man was more than happy to steal in front of his son, and how much he seemed to think that the world revolved around him. But thankfully, we got our belongings back, and that weird entitled old man got put in his place. Your mom is a superhero. She literally would not let this go, and she was not about to have some weird entitled jerk take her belongings in the first place. And the thing is, not to mention this guy's poor attitude, but the way he was acting in general, and how dismissive he was of the situation, pretty much made it impossible to work with him and find any kind of solution. If he was just honest and said, "Oh, here it is, I found it on the ground," or something along those lines, this all could have been solved so quickly. So if anything, at least this guy learned a valuable lesson, that you can't go around and steal other people's things. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked down below in the description. My partner's grandma, who lives with us, is violating almost every boundary that I've put in place, and it's seriously suffocating, and I really don't know what to do. So to start off, I want to say that I feel so suffocated at this point that I'm legitimately close to having having a mental breakdown. I'm a 31-year-old female, and I started dating my partner a couple of years ago, and it started off as long distance. And recently, I moved to his country. I spent over $10,000 on a visa. I went back to school here for 9 months to get certified in healthcare work, and I am now working full-time. Basically, I did everything right and by the book. Unfortunately, there is a housing shortage here, and me, my boyfriend, his mom, and his grandparents were all forced to chip in and move into a house together. It is extremely crowded. As an extreme introvert with severe social anxiety who lived alone for the past 10 years, it's become an absolute nightmare situation for me, but I just grit and bear it because we don't have any other choice. Now, I might have been able to stand it if his grandma wasn't completely bombarding me non-stop, and this is incessantly at all hours of the day. I literally cannot leave my room without a sudden barrage of questions as well as weird comments. She would say things like, "Your milk is expiring in 4 days. Did you know that? It's gonna be hot this week. The humidity is gonna be 80% and it's raining on Friday. The humidity is what's really gonna get you though. Have you checked the weather?" And it goes on and on and on. Absolutely endless. And 99% of the time, it's stupid stuff that does not need to be communicated with me. It's like a nightmare, endless stream of useless thoughts. People have told her nicely to stop, but she just won't do it. It's gotten to the point where I just stay in my bedroom unless I absolutely have to go out because I have such massive anxiety about being totally bombarded the second I leave my room. I can't even wake up and make a coffee in the morning without knowing my social battery is about to be drained to absolute zero. And this is gonna happen immediately. Like, I'm clearly not even fully awake and I get completely bombarded. And if I don't respond, she'll just aggressively repeat what she said until I respond or shame me for not wanting to talk. I have bad anxiety about using the bathroom now too, because the second I go to use it, she'll come through the hall and start doing laundry less than a foot from the bathroom door. And the walls are paper thin. It's like I get to the bathroom and I'm not even sat down yet, but I have to just leave the bathroom for another hour until she's done so I can use it in peace. I feel like an absolute prisoner in my own home. She's also taken to invading our bedroom when we're at work and trying to tidy up, which I am absolutely not okay with. I am in my 30s. I'm not related to this woman. I don't want her violating my personal space and going through my belongings. I've also had to buy a lock for my laundry basket because we've asked her several times not to do my laundry when I'm out, but she does it anyways. I absolutely do not want this woman touching my underwear or handling any of my clothes. Whenever she does that, I put it back in the laundry basket anyways because I have mild OCD and I can't wear clothes that some random woman has been handling without my permission. It feels so violating. In fact, multiple people have asked her to stop going into other people's rooms, but she feels entitled to it because she sees us, an adult couple, as children whose boundaries are just optional for her to respect. All that being said, I've brought up these issues with my partner multiple times, and he refuses to even listen at this point because he sees her as this sweet old lady who's just trying to help. It's like as long as her intentions are good, she's allowed to continuously violate me and my boundaries and push me closer to a mental breakdown. And I'm just not allowed to mention how much it's affecting me because that makes me a negative, ungrateful jerk. The other day, she was bombarding everyone the second they woke up, and he mentioned it in the group chat that we have with his mom and his sister. She did the same thing to me when I woke up, so I messaged him privately, and I said to him, yeah, she did the same thing to me when I got up too. And he started going, she's old, give her a break. I told him I'm allowed to be annoyed by someone violating my boundaries, just like he was annoyed this morning too. And he told me, you need to stop complaining. It is what it is. Just drop the whole violating your boundaries thing. I don't want to be made to feel like I should have a problem with it when you're the only one who has a problem with it. And then he told me, just talk to a professional if it's affecting your mental health. When he said this, I was beyond horrified. And I am still horrified that he thinks the solution to my boundaries not being respected is for me to go pay a therapist to try and get over it. As if the one making me feel so violated in my own home isn't the problem. But no, I'm the one that has to suck it up and go seek mental health help so that she's free to violate me whenever she wants. It just feels so backwards. and I feel like I can't breathe in this place. This is my own home that's supposed to feel like a sanctuary where I can go and be at peace, but I haven't felt a single moment of peace since I moved in here because she never leaves, and she never gives me a moment of space if I leave my room. It is an absolute nightmare at this point. I'm not sure what I'm looking for with this. Maybe just some validation, because I feel like I'm going crazy. Moving out isn't an option either, because there aren't any homes left. They've all been bought up by foreign investors and turned into Airbnbs. And moving back home to my country isn't an option either, because I'm not willing to move back to my country, especially with all of the political upheavals that have been happening. I'm just so close to having a breaking point though, and I'm sick of being made out to be the bad guy for desperately asking for the most basic human boundaries to be respected in the slightest. But this woman feels entitled to just act however she wants with no respect to anyone else in the home, and she gets away with it because her intentions are good. What should I do? First and foremost, there's always an option somewhere. That's like the first thing I realized when I finally became an adult. There is always another option. And so if your partner wants to treat you like garbage, and if the rest of the house wants to ignore this lady not respecting your boundaries, then I think it's time to start finding another place to live. And sure, I hear you. You're telling me that there's no other place to live because everything's getting grabbed by Airbnb. I get it. But I would like to at least think that you can at least find a roommate somewhere and at least find some way of getting out of that house. Maybe check with work. Maybe check with, like, I don't know, a local church or something. Somewhere, someone has to have some kind of bed that you can sleep on and find some kind of peace. If I was in that situation, I would absolutely be doing that at day one. If this lady was rummaging through my stuff, as well as being just super annoying, I would be losing my mind. And honestly, the questions and the weird comments wouldn't personally bother me that much, but it's the fact that she's going into my private space. She's invading my room just to try and clean it up and rummage through it is incredibly inappropriate. And how can your boyfriend seriously not see where you're coming from? You moved to another country for him. You spent 9 months at school just to get certified in healthcare. Like, that is unfair in the slightest for him not to see where you're coming from. The other option you could really consider is maybe taking things into your own hands. And what I mean by that is just stop being nice. Like, don't be cordial, don't be polite, because clearly this lady just doesn't respect your boundaries. Maybe being just a little bit more forward with what you do want will hopefully make this lady stop talking to you, leave you alone, and allow you to have some kind of space to yourself. But regardless of what you do, hopefully it all gets worked out, because not only is this grandma incredibly obnoxious, but also your boyfriend should be ashamed of himself, and he should be way more accommodating to what you're currently going through emotionally and mentally. I just found out that my girlfriend is 20 weeks pregnant, and her parents want me to sign away my rights to my child because they don't want me involved with this baby in the slightest, and I seriously don't know what to do. So we recently found out that my girlfriend is about 20 weeks pregnant. She has an IUD, and her cycles haven't been the same since, if you know what I mean. So she didn't think anything of missing a few. Her parents hated me before this, and obviously it's only gotten worse now. I don't have the best history. I went to juvie and I definitely have bad grades, but ever since I've been with my girlfriend for almost a year, things have gotten a lot better. We've had less fights and less substances of any kind. I've been sober for around 7 months and also been with my foster parents for 8 months, which is the longest I've been kept around. I actually don't mind them. They want to help me be a good dad, and my foster dad has been letting me work for him part-time. He says I'm really good. I'm currently working in landscaping. He says I have a lot of potential when I've mostly heard the opposite. He makes me feel good about myself, just like my girlfriend. She always roots for me and says I can do better if I just try. Anyways, her parents have never liked me or wanted me around. I'm not even allowed to come over to their place. In fact, they don't want me involved with this baby at all. They've talked to me without my girlfriend around and pretty much begged me to just get lost. They think my girlfriend and the baby will be better off without me. I don't know if they're wrong or if they're right. My foster parents say that they're wrong. My girlfriend has cried a few times. She's honestly scared. She's begged me not to leave and to help her. I want to help and take care of her. I've promised her that I'd be with her no matter what. Her parents pretty much want to adopt the baby and take responsibility for it. The problem with this is they wouldn't let me around. I think in some ways it's better, but both me and my girlfriend want to be involved. I know that they would let her help and do whatever, but I don't think I would ever get to see my baby, and that just doesn't sit right with me. Her parents want me to get rid of my rights to my child. They said that they'll send me pictures and stuff, and they even backtracked backtracked and said if I do sign them away, they'll let me visit sometimes. My foster parents think they're bluffing and just want me out of the picture. And in fact, they say I shouldn't sign anything. And to that end, I absolutely agree. I just want my girlfriend's parents to see me in a different light and that I'm trying. I'm not a bad guy. I want what's best for my girlfriend and the baby. My foster parents say as long as I'm doing my best and trying hard, then that's what matters. I genuinely, desperately want my girlfriend's parents to like me, and I want them to want me around. I don't want them to think I'm the worst thing that's ever happened to her. How do I prove them wrong? What should I do? I think the first thing you need to realize is that this is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 4 years. It's not going to happen in 10 years. It's going to happen slowly over time. And the best way to do that is to be an amazing dad and an amazing partner to your girlfriend. You need to realize that you made a serious decision by spending quality time with your girlfriend. And sure, you want to be involved and you want to be helping out with the baby, but I think you need to realize that you are now an adult. Like, you just fast-tracked all the way up to being an adult in this situation, and you have a kid on the way. And honestly, actions are going to speak a lot louder than words. So whichever way you decide to go, I really hope it works out the best for you and your girlfriend. Because with a baby on the way, considering how young both of you really are, I really think you're both going to need as much help as you can possibly get. My boyfriend thinks I have inappropriate emotional reactions and feels the need to correct me all the time, and now I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I have been together for almost 2 years. Our relationship has been good up to this point. However, the past 2 months, he's been doing weird things. He will supposedly test me just to see what my emotional response will be to different situations. And apparently, I'm failing these tests and not reacting how he thinks I should. For example, he will call me to tell me that he's going to a friend's house for a few hours before he comes home. I'll tell him something along the lines of, okay, well, thanks for letting me know. And he thinks that this is the wrong response because it's not emotional enough. He feels like I should be upset that he's not spending that time with me. Same thing when he took a trip to visit a friend. I told him to have fun and tell his friend I said hi. He thought that I should be upset and that I should be crying, asking him not to go, and calling him every few hours while he was gone. He thinks that my incorrect responses are a sign that I don't love him and that I'm not invested in the relationship. He started giving me the silent treatment when he's upset about something, and I usually let him have his silence for a little bit and hope that he'll just come out of it and say what's wrong. But that honestly doesn't happen. I instead have to acknowledge that he's upset and giving me the silent treatment. To break the silence and get the conversation going, I'll say something like, okay, you're obviously upset about something. Are you going to tell me what it is so we can talk about it and resolve the issue? And every single time, his response has always been, you're a smart girl, figure it out. This response just seems really dumb on multiple levels. It doesn't resolve anything. It essentially cuts off any discussion that could happen, and it's said to antagonize me. But I don't play into it, and I just tell him, okay, you're not ready to talk, that's fine. I'm going to continue what I'm doing and enjoying myself. When you're ready to talk, let me know and we can resolve this. Then I just continue on with whatever I was doing. He gets upset with these responses because they aren't the correct reactions. According to him, I'm supposed to be upset. I'm supposed to keep asking him what's wrong, asking him what I can do to fix the situation, and maybe even start crying. But I'm not doing any of that stuff. He thinks that I'm emotionally stunted and that I need to work on developing the right responses. I've told him that his tests are causing unnecessary strains in our relationship. I've also tried to talk to him about what prompted this change, but he gives me the same line of saying, you're a smart girl, figure it out. I honestly don't feel there's anything wrong with how I'm reacting, but the few friends that we have all agree with him. Are my emotional reactions wrong? I don't think they are, and it's honestly making me question everything and I don't know what to do. Your boyfriend sounds like a narcissist. Honestly, this guy's 32 years old and he feels the need to not only be manipulative, but also emotionally awful. Like, seriously, you could do a lot better than this. I don't know if you realize it, but you're doing something called gray rocking, where you don't feed into any of the antagonizing comments that a narcissist sends your way, and instead you just remain emotionless. And I can see why you do that, because your boyfriend is just awful. Like, seriously, who does that? Who tries to claim that your responses and your emotional reactions are incorrect? That's completely ridiculous. Honestly, in my opinion, you could do a lot better than this guy, because he sounds incredibly controlling and he sounds incredibly manipulative. And I seriously think you would be so much happier away from this narcissist. My roommate is an absolute nightmare, scamming me out of money and forcing me to give give up my cat that I just got simply because she was so irrational and I didn't trust her. But eventually I moved out and I was able to find a life of my own. And I'm honestly so great to be away from that psychopath. Here's what happened. So this next story is an update to a previous story that we covered on this channel, where the original poster's entitled roommate forced them to pay for Wi-Fi that they never had access to in the first place. Here's what they had to say. So in my original post, I talked about my entitled roommate by the name of Brandy, and after the events that went down with the Wi-Fi, Brandy and I continued living with each other for the next several months. We remained cordial to one another and mostly stayed out of each other's way. This was relatively easy since the last few months I lived there, she practically lived at her boyfriend's apartment down the hill from where our apartment building was. So during the pandemic, I started struggling with the loneliness that comes with social distancing. I was really depressed, and one of the main things keeping me going on days that I felt especially lonely was the cat that my roommate had. I've had animals pretty much my entire life, and their company can really fill that empty space for companionship that I need. However, as Brandy started spending more time at her boyfriend's apartment, she started taking the cat with her as well. Those days were hard. However, because it was her cat and not mine, I never asked her to leave him with me, even though I was really struggling. So as a result, I started thinking about getting a cat for myself. I've introduced cats into new spaces and social situations several times before, so I felt confident that I could do that here. I thought it over for a while because I didn't want to get a new cat, only to start going back to work and then leave it alone 90% of the time. I also wanted to make sure I was ready for a lifelong commitment that comes with having a pet. So anyways, I decided to get a cat. I approached Brandy to talk it over with her. At first, she seemed open to the prospect, but then suddenly she wasn't. She told me no, as if I were a child asking a parent for something. I was so frustrated because I own the apartment just as much as she did and had always been more than considerate with her. I approached her to discuss it one more time, and she started telling me how she didn't want another animal in her apartment because her cat already lived there. She said to me, "Cats can't share litter boxes, so that's gonna be an issue," which isn't true because anyone who owns cats knows that they can and do all the time. And anyways, it's gonna scratch up my couch and rug. And also for reference, her own cat already did that frequently, and she had to put up protective covers on the couch for that reason. I explained that I would be happy to meet her halfway. I'll pay for better quality couch covers than the one she already had and replace the rug with a different one if she was really that concerned about it. She also said as a Hail Mary attempt that the day I bring another cat into this apartment, she's gonna put her couch in storage and then I'm gonna have to find something else to sit on in the living room. I calmly explained that I didn't move in for the couch. I moved in to find a place to live. I told her I'd be fine to come up with an alternative solution for the couch. However, at this point, I was not asking her. I was telling her. She was not happy with this in the slightest and accused me of holding back on telling her I was getting a cat until after we renewed our lease. I explained that I had not decided to get a cat until my job announced that we would all be working from home for at least another 6 months, which was several weeks after we renewed our lease. I also told her that even though I wanted to adopt an older cat or a bonded pair, I felt it would be easier to just get one kitten because kittens are usually easier to introduce into new environments and to new cats. So overall, I really was trying my best to compromise with her. She finally and eventually gave in and accepted that I was getting a cat. And surprise, surprise, she did not remove the couch in the slightest, despite her blatant threats to do so earlier. When I finally found a kitten to take home, I let Brandy know when I would be bringing her back, just so she would know. I gave her the plan I was following from an online pet journal, so she would know how this was going to be. The day arrived and I brought my new kitten home. I brought the kitten into my room, which was ready with toys, food, and a new scratching pad. I left her in there to curiously explore with my boyfriend supervising. Brandy asked when her cat and mine were going to meet, and I reiterated that they weren't meeting that day because my kitten needed a few days to acclimate to the room and recognize it as her safe space. And when I said that, my roommate practically blew a fuse and started yelling at me that I wasted her time and that I should have explained that. I reminded her that I did explain in my text messages and that I sent her the plan I was going to follow so she could see it for herself. She said to me, "I'm not going to read all that text. That's like a novel." And just for everyone's information, it wasn't a novel. It was maybe a few paragraphs tops. I told her that was her own fault for not reading it and that I had done everything I could to prepare her for this. We also had a few in-person conversations about it, but apparently she didn't remember any of those either. She then started yelling at me about how I was a terrible roommate and how all I did was lock myself in my room with my boyfriend all the time, and now I'm just gonna do that with a kitten as well. She then started complaining about other things I was doing that upset her. She accused me of never cleaning around the apartment, even though I kept everything I touched as clean as possible. I reminded her that I offered to work on some kind of cleaning schedule with her when I first move in. However, she had told me that she had a certain way that she liked things and that she would just do it all herself. I continuously checked in with her while I lived there, but she just kept saying not to worry about it. And now, all of a sudden, it was an issue. She then grabbed our full bin of recyclables, picking things out that were mine, and started throwing them on the floor, telling me I never empty the recyclables, and how I left so much stuff in there, and sometimes that she'd have to make multiple trips down to the dumpster just to empty it. And when she said that, I told her that I never complained when I had to make multiple trips because of how much alcohol she drank every week, and that I didn't exactly enjoy living with an alcoholic roommate. And as a side note, she is often filling up the recycling bin by the end of the week with all of the empty bottles of beer and wine. So while what I said was kind of wrong, it was absolutely true. And when I said that, that was the last straw for her. That absolutely did it. She screamed at me, "I want you out of my apartment now!" But I reminded her that I live here too, and she couldn't just kick me out. I told her she treated me like a house guest and not a roommate. We yelled back and forth some more before she finally left the apartment and I went back to my room. I burst into tears, and my boyfriend comforted me after the fight. I no longer felt safe or responsible having a new kitten in the apartment. And to be honest, I wasn't sure if Brandy could kick me out or not. I had never co-signed a lease with someone before. I thought about it all and talked it over with my boyfriend for the next several hours, and I ended up taking the kitten back to the home that we had gotten her from. And you know what? I cried the entire way there. I said my goodbyes, and I gave them the pet carrier I brought to transport her in, so she'd have something familiar to go home in when someone else took her home. I cried for the next few days. She was such a sweet kitten, and I wish that I could have gotten to know her, but I'm sure she ended up in a much better living situation. I eventually installed a doorknob with a lock and key in my room that weekend and was the only person with a key. I no longer felt safe in my own apartment unless my door was locked. I spent almost all my time in my bedroom when I wasn't working at the desk, in the public space in our dining and living room area. If she was at the apartment, I would usually be at my boyfriend's. Finally, I called the apartment complex and asked if Brandy was actually able to remove me from the lease like she threatened to do. They confirmed that we co-signed together, meaning that neither of us could kick the other one out. So at least I still had a place to live. She started being more cold and passive-aggressive. Her next thing was demanding that I pay my half of the security deposit. When I moved in, I asked immediately what my half was, and she said to me, "I'm probably not getting the security deposit back for this place, so just don't worry about it." But now, ever since we had a falling out, she was insisting. So I told her that I would only give it to our apartment complex because I didn't trust her to not keep the money out of spite, especially considering how she lied to me at one point and had me pay for Wi-Fi that I never had access to in the first place. She kept insisting that I pay her, but I held my ground and eventually she gave up. Now, I wasn't destructive when I lived there. If anything, her cat was way more likely to destroy something than I was. He would frequently eat food that I left unsupervised for less than 10 minutes. This cat has also torn lampshades and had even torn down a canopy that I had installed over my bed twice. She never reimbursed me for any of the damages, by the way, that he did to my property, saying to me, "I told you I was getting a cat when moving in. It's your responsibility because you knew this would happen." So yeah, Brandy was a real peach overall. Finally, I found out that since I was only a co-lease, I could leave whenever I wanted without being penalized for it financially from the apartment complex. My boyfriend then asked me if I would get an apartment with him, and so I agreed. We started looking for places and eventually found somewhere with decent space for the two of us. The first apartment that we wanted wasn't ready until the second week of the following month, so we went with a better option that compromised for everyone. There was another unit that was available the third week of the month that we were in, meaning I would be leaving earlier than I expected. However, it would be easier for Brandy, who was already planning on moving her boyfriend in that same week. I decided not to ask for reimbursement for the fourth week of rent because I figured that would be petty. Despite everything that had happened, I just wanted to leave as peacefully as possible possible and put the whole thing behind me, we got approved for the apartment and began making plans to move. However, do you think it was easy? No, of course not. Brandy was an absolute menace to live with. The last month that I lived there was during a heat wave, and the air conditioning worked well in the rest of the apartment, but just not in my room. Maintenance came over multiple times and kept telling me it was fine, but I couldn't cool down my room without keeping the AC on high. This was absolutely my fault, and I ran up the gas bill very high that month, like 2 times what we normally spent. Brandy sent me a text with a bill and was furious. I apologized and I took full responsibility for it. However, she said that because she had spent most of the past month at her boyfriend's apartment, I should have to pay the full bill. And at this point, I just lost it. I had put up with this woman's temper tantrums for a full year and was not about to pay 4 times what I normally paid simply because she was acting like a Karen demanding a free 4-course meal, all because her dish wasn't hot enough. I finally put my foot down and I told her no. I told her I would gladly pay for the difference in cost. However, she didn't get a free pass on utilities simply because she decided to live at her boyfriend's apartment for a month. I mean, what do you want me to do next? Do you want me to pay for the full rent of the apartment? She told me I was being very unreasonable and that the day I moved out, she would send me one final itemized payment request on Venmo for the full amount of the gas bill, plus all the other utilities and the cost of rent. I sent back to her and said, okay, since we're penny pinching, if you do that, I will send you back the amount you requested minus the 4 months of Wi-Fi you wrongfully charged me for and never paid me back, and the last week of rent I won't be living in for the apartment, and I will itemize it so you can see everything. When I said that, she did not take that well. She told me that was unnecessary, and I added that I picked an earlier week to accommodate her stupid boyfriend's move-in date. If she was going to be petty about the entire thing, so was I. Now, after that, we didn't speak, not even the day that I moved. Some friends and I packed everything up, stuck it in the truck, and were moved into our new place by nightfall. The next morning, I received the faded invoice request from Brandy and breathed a sigh of relief. She only requested my half of utilities, including the gas bill, and then deducted the cost of Wi-Fi and my last week of rent. I had finally won. But that's not the end, as there is one more little happy ending here. A few weeks prior to the move, a friend of mine got me in touch with a lady who ran a shelter from her home for feral cats and kittens. I offered to donate the toys and food that I bought for the kitten that I originally brought home because it made me so sad to look at them. I ended up donating some extra litter and some food as well because I really love cats. When I went to drop them off, she introduced me to a feral mom cat who had just had a litter of kittens. She offered to let me meet them and I said yes. She put the runt of the litter into my arms, who proceeded to crawl up my arm and play with my hair, and I was in love instantly. 2 months later, my boyfriend and I brought home this kitten and her brother over to our apartment and into their forever home. And ever since then, we've been spoiling them with nonstop love and affection. My boyfriend and I are so happy together in our new home. He kind of saved me by suggesting that we move in together, and I couldn't be more grateful. I love him, I love our cats, and I love my life so much now. It was honestly kind of emotional writing this whole thing out, as it was such a traumatic experience dealing with Brandy, but I'm so happy where my life is right now. I haven't spoken with Brandy since I moved out, and honestly, I don't care to. I hope for her sake, she's well and grew up, because dear God Almighty, she definitely needs to. Wow, what an experience. Brandy sounds like an absolute nightmare of a roommate, and she seriously needs an attitude adjustment. I mean, the red flags are just all over the place with this lady. She scammed you out of money for your Wi-Fi, she forced you to give up your cat simply because she was so irrational, and she tried to make you pay for the entirety of the utilities, all because she practically moved to her boyfriend's apartment for a month. Like seriously, that lady's crazy. So good for you for getting away from that crazy lady. And it's really cool to see that your new life is so rewarding. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked down below in the description. My mother is trying to compete with my mother-in-law in being the only grandma in my son's life, and it's honestly obnoxious and I really don't know what to do. So this begins as me and my girlfriend have just had a baby. After some serious pregnancy complications, they had to bring our son 6 weeks early into this world. We spent a night in the hospital, then doctors needed to perform a C-section within the hour, otherwise she and the baby could possibly pass away. I immediately phoned my mother-in-law. My girlfriend wanted me and her mom as birthing partners anyway, and naturally she was worried about her daughter. My stepdad rushed my mother-in-law mother-in-law down, and the two of us rushed into the theater where our beautiful boy was born. He was rushed to intensive care, in which I went with, and my girlfriend was then rushed for further care, to which my mom accompanied her. This is where my entitled mother comes into the picture. She wanted to come down and visit my girlfriend and baby, and I broke it to her that there are no visitors allowed at the moment. They had just both gone through a lot, and they could not have anyone in the room. And this is right about the time that my mother starts to kick it off by saying that she's a grandma too, and she feels underappreciated and used by us. Meanwhile, I'm in the hospital, and my son is hooked up to oxygen, as well as tubes, wires, and medication. And my girlfriend was nearly in the same identical situation. And my selfish mother was complaining that she wasn't there, but my mother-in-law was. I'm sorry, but her mother nearly lost her daughter. Of course she's going to be there. Plus, my mother simply was not allowed on the hospital ward anyways, due to rules and restrictions. But she would not accept that. The following day, she was allowed to come and see my girlfriend and the baby. She came in absolutely livid that my mother-in-law was there again. Not to her face, but kicking it off with me in private. But when she saw how poorly our baby was, she burst into tears and realized he wasn't doing well. She said that she didn't realize how small and poor he was. After a few days, he massively recovered and started getting the majority of the wires and tubes removed. We took my mother a few times to meet him, where she got to hold him and spend time with him. My mother-in-law was working during the week, so she didn't get to see him until the weekend. I took her at the weekend, where my parents also came to visit. This was also the first time that my mother-in-law had got to hold him, and yet here comes my mother as she comes around and takes him away for cuddles. Despite seeing him multiple times in the week, mind you. My girlfriend and her mom didn't complain, but I apologized when I took my mother-in-law home that evening. Thankfully, she said it was fine, but I didn't feel like it was. My mom seemed to calm down, and then today she was helping me prepare the bedroom for the baby coming home, and that's when she saw the coat that my mother-in-law had bought for the baby. And what does my mom do in a situation like this? Well, of course, she accuses her of stealing it. Now, I have no idea where that came from, but apparently my mom felt the shop that it came from was too expensive for her mom to shop at. So at that point, I shut it straight down, and I told her to pack it in. She then pulled a receipt out of the pocket that thankfully was for the coat. With all things considered, I just don't understand why she's so jealous and against my mother-in-law, but she needs to figure it out right away, because it honestly feels like she wants to be the only grandmother in my baby's life. Yeah, your mom is acting crazy. There's no reason to act like that to your mother-in-law, and you would think that both of them would be happy about the situation, but instead your mom is spoiling the mood altogether. So hopefully she figures that out, and hopefully she doesn't turn into this massive nuisance to the family, because that attitude is definitely not going to help anybody out involved, and she seriously better figure that out, or else she's going to burn some bridges in the process. I really dislike the way my wife talks to her employees, and it really bothers me, and I don't know what to do. So my wife and I both work from home on most days. We are in separate rooms, but I overhear her conversations. There are pretty thin walls. She's a manager with about 8 direct reports in several countries. She's been in this role for a couple of years. It was a big shift when she started, but it turns out that she really likes managing. I kind of worry that she likes the wrong things about it though. She fired somebody very soon after she took the job and has let some other people go since. She's been trying to fire an admittedly kind of bad employee for a few months now, but is disappointed to learn that the employee is protected by the laws of their country. Generally, I feel like my wife is really quick with the axe. I find that disappointing, especially since she knows firsthand what it's like to be fired. I've held her during times when she's been fired, and it breaks her heart. But honestly, the most troubling behavior came this week. This week, my wife discovered that a recently hired employee scheduled nearly a month off, starting for next week, and didn't notify their manager. That is obviously a very bad thing. So my wife called them up, and on their call, it became clear that the employee is struggling with multiple issues. They don't get along with their coworkers in country, and one of their family members is close to passing away. Now, from my perspective, I think a tactful approach would have acknowledged the employee's mistake, recognized that it was rooted in an understandable problem, and come up with some kind of remedy. But that's not what my wife did, by a long shot. Instead, she berated this employee, and this stretched for over 2 days of calls, both of which made the employee cry. She lit into the employee. She said to them, "I can help you, but you need to trust me." And as a side note, in some kind of sad way, it's always kind of funny to hear someone angrily demand trust, as if that's how it works. Because you know what? It's not. At one point, by way of anecdote, she tried to tell the employee about a time that she helped another employee who was also having problems. But in doing so, I think she disclosed private information about the other employee's personal and professional life, which seems really bad. And at another point, she said to the employee, "Oh, so this is probably the last trip that you're going to be able to take with your family member, huh?" Which just seems like a horrible and tactless thing for a manager to say to an employee who's going through a rough patch, even if they're trying to do it from a good place. And throughout both conversations, she kept suggesting that the employee think long and hard about whether they want to be at this company, basically encouraging them to quit. That just felt horrible to me. From what I can tell, this person wants to do a good job, but my wife is acting like there's some kind of deceitful layabout trying to pull one over on her. Now, I think my concerns here are valid, but I have absolutely no idea if and how I should raise them to my wife, and how I could do this respectfully. I've brought up work things with her once before in 2021, and we got into a huge fight about it. Since then, I've just pretended not to hear anything. What should I do? I think you can express some kind of concern over what you've heard through the wall, but to make assumptions about the entirety of the situation without hearing it firsthand, as well as what she deals with on a daily basis, really would be the wrong play in my opinion. Because regardless of what you're hearing on the other line, you don't know the full story, even if it really does make it look like your wife is really being a jerk. So I wouldn't go jumping to any kind of conclusion, because that would be an awful thing to do. You could at least say, "Hey, are you okay? Is there something going on? Because I'm hearing things through your work that really sound disturbing, and I just want to see what's happening." Try and take a nice and gentle approach. That might be your best bet. But honestly, jumping to any kind of conclusion without conclusive evidence of what is or isn't happening really will only hurt your relationship in the long run. An entitled Karen claims that I'm flashing gang signs around even though I'm speaking in sign language. But despite that explanation, she still called the cops on us and tried to have us arrested. But things backfired on this entitled Karen almost instantly, and it truly was a sight to behold. Here's what happened. So this tale takes place decades ago, before the rise of the internet, before cell phones. In fact, phones were in the process of shedding their tails, so to speak. I was a girl fast approaching her double digits. Months earlier, my silent world had exploded into sound with the invention of a pair of tiny battery-powered devices that boosted sound called hearing aids. Before this, one made do wearing earpieces connected to a black box worn on the chest using a harness. These devices had a lot of issues and didn't work well with me. They would provide too much feedback. My 10th birthday was on the horizon, and my parents surprised me by renting the party room of my favorite pizza restaurant where most of the staff knew sign language. The restaurant is set up with the party room in the back corner. On the opposite side is the arcade room. There's no door between the party room and the arcade room, and this will be important later. Below these rooms was the standard restaurant floor. Booth after booth lined the walls, and the midsection was divided into two parts. The front part was sunken in, much like a 70s area conversation pit. A central circular table held a fireplace, while gaming systems lined the tables against the wall. Stuff like the Nintendo Entertainment System, the N64, Sega, Atari, PlayStation, stuff like that. The section behind that was a regular table and chair seating. Both sections were rentable for parties. We were setting up in the party room when an entitled Karen appeared. I saw her talking to my uncle and didn't think anything about it, as I was in the process of studying my word list. At this point, I was learning to form noises into words. I could make sounds, just not actual words at this point. A light shoulder tap got my attention, and my cousin signed that my uncle wanted my attention. I go to him, and he signed that this entitled Karen wanted the party room and was offering to switch with us. I asked where her section was, and it was the back section of the middle area, and I agreed to switch. We switch, and I overhear the entitled Karen complaining about gang signs. And now she was not sure of switching simply because she was afraid of violence. But nonetheless, her entitled kid wanted the party room. So we went ahead and switched, and this put us right next to the arcade. A bit later, I'm having my speech lesson with my dad, and the entitled kid of this entitled Karen, as well as her friends, try to dash through to get to the arcade. But when they are told that they can't do that, they run off and cry to their entitled Karen of a mother. I'm on my dad's lap, with one hand on my chest and my other on his, trying to mimic the same motions his chest make as he says the word on my list. And I'm struggling with a word. And that's when we hear a screech. The entitled Karen is pointing at us and talking about how we're using gang signs and talking about all kinds of immoral things, and how her husband husband was going to arrest us all when his backup arrived. At this point, my uncle stood up. Now he's a huge beefcake of a man who is a big teddy bear on the inside. He towers well over her and glares at her. His mouth is moving, and I later learned he was telling her that I was deaf and I was learning to speak, and the language I was speaking was sign language, and it was not gang signs. And no, her spawn and her friends were not going to disrupt our party. They can go around us instead. He didn't care if it was too far, and her stupid kid was not able to walk the distance. At that, red and blue lights started flashing outside, and the entitled Karen looked incredibly smug. The cops rush in, and her face as my uncle greeted them was priceless. My uncle was the police chief. He told this entitled Karen she had a choice. Either she could wear a pair of silver bracelets and stay a night in a 5-star lodging, or she could explain to her entitled child how he cannot disrupt our party and has to walk around us to get to the arcade while also leaving us alone. The cops are dispersed, and my uncle gives an assignment to 2 of the cops to stay around. And it's a good thing that he did, because this entitled Karen ended up earning herself a pair of shiny silver bracelets and a night in a 5-star lodging. The first thing that happened was that the entitled kid and his friends destroyed the salad bar. Next, he tried to make off with the N64 and then nearly succeeded with the PlayStation. He also got caught trying to steal my new Hot Wheels garage playset twice. I think I even overheard her calling me stupid and asking why I wasn't home yet. This entitled Karen also tried to skip out on paying for the party room, in which she actually never bought the party package. And to top it all off, her husband wasn't even a cop, so they ran the evidence against her, and eventually she got locked up. And looking back, it truly is awesome to see how this entitled Karen's plan backfired on her so spectacularly, because she truly had it coming. What an awful person. How on earth could you seriously look at a small child and try to pretend like they're throwing up gang signs when they're just trying to speak sign language? Like, that is unbelievably rude. Like, you seriously have to be not only stupid, but willfully stupid to not know that this is what's going on. And even if you assumed it was gang signs of some kind, you don't just go up to someone and be like, hey, your kid is flashing gang signs in, I don't know, Chuck E. Cheese's or something like that. I mean, that's what this place sounded like, to be completely honest. So I'm really glad that this entitled Karen got put in jail. She clearly was lying to a police officer, and she obviously was trying to get away with stuff that she really shouldn't have gotten away with. And in the end, she really did get exactly what was coming to her. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Today, I messed up by letting a lady sit in our hotel lobby while not realizing that she was actually doing a stakeout to try and determine if her husband was cheating on her with another woman. And I've never been more embarrassed to pass off something to my coworker in my life. Here's what happened. So to start things out, I want to say first and foremost that this was entirely my own fault. On this particular night, I was working a 3 to 11 for the first time at a new property. I was a bit frazzled to say the least, and when I get frazzled, boy do I start making questionable calls. Fast forward, and it's about 30 minutes until the end of my shift, and there's a room full of shenanigans going on. There were quite a few interesting situations that came into the hotel right at the last second, but none of them held a flame to the woman I had to deal with, who is in fact the subject of the story. She enters in and walks to the lobby. She's got a big smile and a kind voice. She says to me, I'm gonna be honest with you, I do not have a reservation. I don't need one. I'm actually just waiting for my husband. I'll even buy a coffee if I could just sit in the lobby and wait. And honestly, in retrospect, people, I just needed a win. I just needed to please someone. I wanted to feel hospitable again. She seemed normal for the most part, but this is where my mistake starts. I cut her off and I say, ma'am, we do have free coffee and we have a place to sit. If you won't be too long, I don't see an issue. And looking back on that, I feel absolutely idiotic, especially when she continues her story. She goes on to say, I'm waiting for my husband because he's cheating on me. They are staying next door and I'm going to catch them. When she finally finished, I had to backtrack. I said, okay, ma'am, I offered you a place to sit, but this sounds like it can escalate into something completely different. So I need to establish some ground rules. For one, I need you to keep quiet. You don't bother anybody else. And secondly, you do not bring your husband, his mistress, or anyone else in here to have a confrontation. And thirdly, you can't stay here for more than an hour. Thankfully, she kept her promise. She sat quietly and sipped her coffee. She didn't bother anyone. She just stared out the window, waiting for her husband to drive by. The night audit arrived, and I informed them I brought this mess into our lobby, and I would be happy to hang out until she left, or I could even escort her out of the lobby. The night auditor, who's also a kind soul, assured me that she can stay and it won't be an issue. Now at this point, I'm awake in my bed, hoping that my night auditor isn't catching grief. I messed up, but I just wanted to do something nice for someone tonight, just to atone for the crimes against hospitality that I witnessed tonight overall. And just like me, it's always in these moments of weakness that I invite chaos into the equation. So hopefully nothing bad came of this situation, because the last thing I would ever want to do is to bring unnecessary stress onto my coworkers. Yeah, that sounds like a messy situation. You thought this lady was just gonna try and stick around and maybe hang out for a little bit, and you chimed in right as she was explaining, thinking that this would be a simple solution. But nope, you've got somebody who's trying to catch her husband cheating. Like, this is not gonna be fun in the slightest. And thankfully, we actually have an update to this story, and we know exactly what happened. And according to the night auditor, nothing happened. This lady left after an hour, and she left calmly at that. So at least there's that kind of silver lining. So thankfully, nothing really came of it, and you didn't disturb or throw your coworker under the bus. And considering how this could have gone, I think everybody got off easy, and everyone should be lucky there wasn't some massive confrontation inside the lobby. My best friend is accusing me of gaslighting him because I gave him relationship advice about a girl that I also liked. And fast forward to present day, and I'm now with that girl, and he is upset with me, and I seriously don't know what to do. So to start things out, both me and my friend share a lot of interests, and we met each other our freshman year of college. Due to our courses the next year, we met this girl, which is now my girlfriend the next year. She and a lot of other people often said that we were like brothers, which was also true to some extent, given we have a lot of similarities in our personality and interests. Anyways, I instantly grew a liking for my girlfriend 3 months after meeting her. I guess she picked up on it because she once called me alone to talk about something and made sure I just wanted to be friends. I was heartbroken, but she's such an awesome person. I value the friendship even more after that. I didn't say I liked her because I knew she would have lessened our contact, thinking I wouldn't be able to handle it. I think she has mentioned this to my friends also at some point. I'm not sure when though. 2 years later, and my friend tells me he likes her and is going to ask her out. Now I was devastated. I knew he had a thing for her, but just not sure how big it was. They talked for hours that night, and apparently she told him that she wanted to focus on her career, and in an ideal world, she would have given him another year to get to know him more, and that she would hate if she had to make a decision now and regretted it later. When my friend told me this, I talked to her, and I told her that my friend's an amazing guy. If she really likes him, she should go ahead, but only if she was sure about it. She told me that she wanted to focus on her career right now, and just hopes that she doesn't regret it later. My friend also knew that I talked to her after him, and she then made it clear to him that they should be just friends and not have any hopes attached to it, because otherwise she wouldn't be able to hang out freely with him. I then talked to my friend that probably it's for the best, because they had such opposing personalities. Maybe they wouldn't have worked out as something more. Then I told him that he would get over this, and referenced one of my earlier heartbreaks and how I got over it. Now, I'm not going to go into the details because my friend might see this, but next year, some situations arose due to which I was able to spend more time with this girl. We shared a lot of moments together, and I let her know that I was romantically interested. She thought about it for about 3 to 4 days, during which I assumed she discussed this with a couple of her close friends, my friends included. She finally said yes, and we got together. Both of them still remained and are close friends after she rejected him. She says she admires a lot of the qualities about him, which is understandable. He is a smart and kind guy. I also sometimes envy how he's able to put a little effort into his job and still be good at it. He has acknowledged to her that their friendship is lopsided. He also reduced contact with her once he knew that we were together, but that was after we got together, so I guess he still had some feelings for her left. Fast forward to 3 to 4 months later, and now my friend is accusing me of gaslighting him because according to him, if I liked her from the beginning, it was not my place to talk to him or to her for that matter, and that he can no longer believe anything I ever said. I tried to convince him that I never badmouthed him and that he could talk to my girlfriend if he wants. I just didn't want to tell him because then it would have been like we're competing for her, and I didn't want to put my girlfriend in that spot 2 years ago where she would have had to choose between 2 people. That wouldn't have been fair. So now my friend's angry with me, and I seriously don't know what to do. It really sounds like your friend has sour grapes about the situation. And no, I don't think you were gaslighting him. I think you were just trying to be a good friend and let him have his space to try and ask this girl out. Like, you did the right thing in my opinion of not saying, hey, I also kind of like her. Can you even imagine how awkward that would be for this woman? Not only did does she have 2 guys that like her, which is like, okay, that's fine. But also, these 2 guys are best friends. And if you reveal that, yeah, you like her as well, then in my opinion, it absolutely would have escalated into something super toxic. So by not saying anything, you really were trying to save feelings. Also, let's look at the facts here. The original poster's girlfriend clearly likes him. A year later, she found herself in a different spot, and she was ready to have a relationship in her life. And he just so happened to be the person to step in. And so I really don't think there's any gaslighting going on. Considering the circumstances of when the original poster's friend asked her out, it just was not good timing. And to me, it really seems like this supposed best friend is just really jealous that his best friend got with this girl before he could. And at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about that. I think you did the best you could to try and have your friend have some kind of happiness in his life, despite the fact that she turned him down. So honestly, there's not much you can do about it. I think this might be a situation where everything's kind of inevitable, and your friend would probably be mad at whatever guy did end up getting with this girl. So if anything, maybe just let it go. Just be happy with what you have and try to move forward as best as you can. My parents don't take my school assignments seriously and almost caused me to lose points on my grade simply because I was trying to take this seriously. Here's what happened. So I'm sure a lot of people who've taken childcare classes in school have had this experience before, all while you're carrying a child around with you for a week. My family members were absolute jerks about it, and I was very, very scared that I would get a bad grade because of this. I've also heard of awful stories about people who took this class and lose grades due to jerks that wanted a good laugh. So I was expecting for this part of the class, as well as this section, that I would be carrying a flower baby or babies around for the whole week. For those who might not know what this is, it's basically where students are assigned with a bag of flour depending on your luck. You get a healthy 5-pound to 10-pound bag of flour or a premature 3-pound baby, and you would then have to take care of that bag of flour. It sounds silly, but it's all for the class. Now, I was fortunate enough to only have the 5-pound one to carry around with me, which I'm supposed to care for and treat like a child. And I really went into mama bear mode. And this also has to do with the fact that I was a babysitter for my younger siblings and my cousins. So caring for this wasn't going to be that hard, or so I thought. I gave my child a hat to wear and even wrapped it up with an extra sweater that I no longer wear. In fact, I even get extra credit for keeping it warm during the winter. When I walked into my next class, I get the usual whisper and giggle about carrying a bag of flour around, as most childcare students would get. So I was extra careful and basically had it sitting on my lap the entire time. And this was all the way up until gym class. I asked my trusted friend Anna to babysit it for me and that I will then come back for it later. Fast forward and I'm finally getting home, and immediately my parents are staring at me like I'm crazy, simply because I'm carrying a bag of flour around in my arms, despite the fact that they signed the permission slip which would allow me to carry it around for a week. My grandma then says to me, "What's that? Just toss it in the garbage. It's going to leak all over the place." I said to her that this was for my class assignment and I have to take care of it for a week. My parents said, "Yeah, sure, you're just making things up so you can carry weird things around to fit in with bad people." Now, after they said that, I just ignored them and I headed upstairs to my room to do my homework. I leave for a bit to eat dinner and I come back to hear giggling from my room. I open my room to see my entitled siblings throwing my flower baby like a ball. I freak out and I grab it, telling them I'm going to lose points from my class if it rips open, and they'll have to vacuum the carpet. They then take off running to tell on me for yelling at them, to which I unsurprisingly get yelled at, as well as for taking the stupid assignment too seriously and not letting them throw around my flower baby for just a little bit. Yeah, it's crazy. So I respond to them and say, "Okay, fine. Go buy them a bag of flour and let them throw it around. And if the bag explodes covering the carpet with flour, I'm not vacuuming it up." I then got an earful for over an hour on being respectful of your elders and that I shouldn't talk back to anybody. And this is all when I was just trying to be honest about my entitled sisters and what they were doing. But a week passed by and I made it through without my child leaking or getting ripped in the process. In fact, for another student one time, a bully snatched their flower baby and threw it off the second floor balcony, only for it to land and explode on the head of a freshman walking by. The student got a new replacement bag, while the bully was suspended for a while, and the freshman was traumatized as well. Honestly, I'm just glad the assignment is done, and I'm glad that I don't have to carry around that stupid flower baby anymore. Your parents were being absolutely ridiculous. Like, not only did they sign the permission slip for you to do this assignment, but then they suddenly have this selective amnesia where they're like, "We don't remember doing that. You're just just trying to fit in with bad people. Like, come on, are you serious right now? What kid in their right mind would carry around a bag of flour to try and fit in? If anything, they're just gonna get bullied for doing that. So good for you for at least getting through the week without losing your flour baby. That would have been obnoxious to deal with, and I can't imagine losing points on your GPA all because your siblings wanted to throw it around like a basketball. My girlfriend really wants to get married with me, but I don't feel ready, and at this point, I don't know what to do. So I've been with my girlfriend for 2 years now, but she has been hinting that she wants to get married with me since the first year. I love her, but I told her that we are too young to marry, that right now is not the time to think about it, but I also have another reason not to marry that I haven't told her. I've always been very introverted and shy. I only had one teenage relationship in high school that lasted like, 3 months? And it never got anywhere. And I've never been with another girl since then until I started dating her. And that was right when I turned 21. She is my first real relationship. And the thought of settling down with her makes me comfortable and happy, but I'm also worried that I will become bitter for the rest of my life, knowing that I just wasted my life taking such a big decision so soon and with none of the experience. My girlfriend has had a lot of relationships in the past, and I don't blame her. Maybe she is ready to settle down with me after all of her dating life, but I don't feel that way. I didn't even have a dating life. I know some people marry their first love, and they live perfectly good marriages, and I'm happy for them. I just feel like that's not for me, because it just feels wrong, like skipping an incredibly important part of your life, like starting to work at 6 and missing your entire childhood. It breaks my heart because I do love her. She is a really nice girl, and I've grown a lot alongside her. I can really see us both getting married in the future, but just not right now. I don't really know anymore what to do. How do I know if she is the best for me if I haven't dated literally anybody else? I should be happy for finding the one so early in my life, and I do, but I don't at the same time. It makes me feel so guilty and selfish to think this way, because I can already feel people thinking, so you got a perfectly good relationship and you're throwing it away just because you don't feel ready yet? And I feel like I'm going to regret whatever path I decide. If I stay with her and I get married, I feel like I will become bitter. And if I leave, I would be leaving a good relationship just to mess around and finding out that she really was the one for me. Right now, she's telling me that I have to ask for permission to her parents soon, but permission for what? Permission to date her after almost dating her for 3 years? Or is she setting me up to ask her parents for her hand? Also, her plans and my plans are very different. She is planning to stay in the country, and I'm planning on leaving the country. She doesn't want kids, but I do. I feel like all that stuff needs to be considered as well. What should I do? First off, I think you need to make it very clear that you're not ready to get married. You need to communicate that clearly to your girlfriend like right now, because she really wants to get married, and it looks like she's really trying to lead the conversation in that direction. But you have made it very clear that right now, at this stage of your life of only being 23 years old, you're not ready to get married yet. And that is completely reasonable in my opinion. It is not irrational to pump the brakes and be like, wait a second, I don't think I'm ready for this. If anything, I think that shows a lot of maturity, and it shows that you're taking this seriously. So no, you should not feel forced to get married. And honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to figure things out first before taking this very vital and important step. And it's also really unfair that your girlfriend is almost pushing this on you. And it really does seem kind of rushed. Like, this seems like it's happening all of a sudden overnight. So I think having a conversation and telling her exactly how you feel really will be the deciding factor of if you stay with her or if you have to go. Because towards the end of this post, you said it yourself. You both have some very different plans for what you want out of life. And I completely agree. These are things that absolutely need to be considered, especially when you're considering getting married. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.